just barely catches it. Now Limon is going to try and overtake on Fonseca. Fonseca gives that one up, almost a little too wide there for Limon. Holds tough and sending it deep around the banking, and Shell Oil, he's going to take the spot back. Fonseca, that was a brilliant move. This is full drift here from the Japanese driver. Watch this. Unreal. That car should not be still going. That is just seat of your pants stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just kind of landed a little bit wrong for him, but fortunately, at least pointed in the right direction. This was crazy, though.
And hasn't been shaken, but man, is he close to that wall.
Look at the oversteer. He looks to the inside. Michael tried to cover off. He's going to squeeze him down a little bit. Tries to open up the corner. Cut back and see if he can get the launch, and it's much quicker off. Oh, but he covers him down to the inside.
Oh my goodness, covers him down to the inside. I think there may have been a little bit of contact there, but Michael Johnson going to get the benefit of the draft here. You can see him closing down on the back of the 79. And there's the late move from Michael going down to the inside, trying to get into the braking zone.
The red mist is up for these two, and down into the braking. Can Johnson get it done? Yes, he does. Don't count out Travis. Tries to cut back. Goes the long way around. Nothing doing. No, he holds tight. He could try and get it in there. No, now he starts to fall back.
Starts to fall back. Going to try to send it a little bit on the outside of 15. Sometimes you can get a crossover there, but not going to work. He's going to have a wider line now into Turkey to try to carry a little bit more speed, but he's not going to find an easy way to try to get on by. And indeed, Michael Johnson just slides that car off the apex a little bit to prevent off any attack.
This is your chance to get behind the wheel. The opportunity to race just like the pros. From the grassroots levels, where we all got our start, to the most popular race cars on the planet. From the fairgrounds of Nashville to the high banks of Daytona, to tracks that will never be forgotten. Realistic driving, intense competition, all from the comfort of your own home. This is the ultimate motorsports simulation. This is iRacing.
Yesterday commenced 24 hours worth of racing. The second annual running of the Majors 24 had much fanfare and success. The tides of tactical battle between victory and defeat can be minute at this behemoth of a track. The only difference, though, between yesterday and today is that we shrink this race down by a factor of 10 and say 2 hours and 25 minutes to get your championship sorted. Welcome to Pays de la Loire, welcome to Circuit de la Sarthe, and welcome to GSRC. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those watching around the world for the Majors 2.4 hours here from the European Pro Split in what has been a thoroughly entertaining championship so far. I'm Jake Sperry. Derek Watson is alongside me for the ride, along with Majors 24 GTE winner Christian Challoner. Calling the shots shown today is going to be Zach Johnson, and he'll be using the cameras provided by Dougie Beard. But if ever there was a crown jewel of endurance racing, this one would sit at the centerpiece above all others. But why is this place such a pantheon for endurance? Let's understand more with our GSRC track guide.
Welcome to Le Mans. When you talk about legendary circuits, this is a place that stands among the most famous in the world. Part permanent road course, part temporary street circuit, it traipses through the countryside just south of the city where it gets its namesake. Its size matches its reputation as well, clocking it at 8.5 miles, which equates to roughly 13.5 kilometers. However, when you take into account that it's split by only 33 turns, the frighteningly fast nature of this circuit becomes clear. Most of the corners have been added over the century of history it's experienced, but many have become renowned and respected. The two turns at the opposite ends of the massively long Mulsanne straight play equally important roles. Tertre Rouge requires a great exit in order to not lose massive amounts of time, while Mulsanne corner takes bravery and precision in order to brake as late as possible and keep opponents from passing you on the way in. There's also hair-raising moments like the tricky entry to Indianapolis, or the close walls along the bridge section in the Porsche Curves. To win here, drivers will need a very low downforce setup, a good sense of strategy, and heaps of bravery. The 24 Hours of Le Mans is the crown jewel of endurance racing, which many drivers dream of someday winning and many fans flock to witness in person. Once you've driven the track here on iRacing, it's easy to see why.
There is a reason why this place has become so fabled, and this race will be an added stress with multi-class action. Derek, what are the particularities with the racing today?
This is a great track, and we've seen a whole bunch of it in the past day. It's a full 33-turn course, 8.47 miles or 13.63 kilometers. It's a track full of fun turn names like Indianapolis, Porsche, Daytona, and many more we're going to talk about throughout this race. It's a challenging track. You're going to have we have one big long straightaway with a couple chicanes in it to really get yourself comfortable. And it's going to be a fun event. I'm looking forward to this, to seeing how these drivers attack this on a different knowledge of a 10% of what they did yesterday.
And this really is a high-speed thrill ride. That Mulsanne straight, the run through the golf corner and over towards Indianapolis, everything you could want for it. But Christian, we've been talking about this is a championship, and this has been a fun championship so far. But it has been a case of one driver has been walking head and shoulders above a very, very close chasing pack.
Yeah, absolutely. And that driver, Sean Campbell, he's had 5 starts, 5 wins so far in this series, 130-point lead over Dallas Pataska. He's in second in the Pro Division. Chris Barrett, a little bit further back. He's 55 points further back in third. David Malneritz has actually moved into fourth for Grizzly TFR Le Mans. He's 236 points off the lead. And Jamie Conway, another Apex Tech Racing Pro driver, is there in fifth spot, 264 points behind. But moving over to the sportsman side of things, we've got Brian Boomsma. He has actually only got a 1-point lead over Garen Batten. And Garen Batten has been doing a ton of laps this week. He's up there on the chart for one of the most amount of practice laps, so expected him to be pretty strong in the sportsman field. He's got a 81-point lead over Alexander Olsen, who's back there in third. Another tight fight, actually. 10 points just separates third from fourth, with Daniel Blomqvist 92 points back. Edward Shelley, 129 points back in sportsman.
And so over towards Legends, David H. Baker, let's not forget, picked up an almighty second place, I should say, over at Indianapolis. Last time we were with the major series, so his margin, almost 500 points over Mark Redford, Grizzly TFR 1 and 2 in terms of that category, with Mario Schroer, Thomas Geisler, and Roberto Di Filippis ending out Legends. And Legends Sport, Jan Bruni leads Håkan Schutt in second position, just a 3-point margin there, with Gary Thomas, Andy Banfield, and Michael Hagstrom in fifth position for the Team Players Hagstrom Racing Team, 191 points back. When it comes to the teams, it's Apex Tech Racing Pro, I should say, who have control of that. They've got 117 over Satellite, with Grizzly TFR in a good scrap for third with HW Racing, and then Grizzly TFR Daytona in fifth position overall. The sports teams, NRG Racing ES, 89 points clear of Bright Esports. They're fighting so hard in sportsmen between each other, with the Black Tree Race Crew, Hanson Brothers Racing, and Grizzly TFR Spa rounding out the top 5 there. But that's enough about talking about what's come and gone. Let's talk about now, Derek, and this track and this race. What is this race got in store for everyone?
This race has got probably a few things going on. It's going to be a cooler track temp than what we saw at the end of the 24 that we just covered here on GSRC. 88 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's going to be fun. So let's go through the track details. So it's round 7 of this race. It's 144 minutes. Now, compared to our 24, only LMP1s and GTEs. There will be no LMP2s in this field. Of course, this is an open setup race, so drivers are able to tune these cars and make them what they want them to be. And they do get one spare car in case an accident were to happen somewhere across this big track.
this is a huge track, and well, if they've got the spare car, you break it, you get an extra opportunity like the T car. But let's talk about then what we are racing for here today. Every single time we go out racing, when it comes to the major series, there's always a charity associated with it. And our charity this week is the Fight Colorectal Cancer charity, founded in 2005 by chairman of the board, Nancy Roach. And she had already made huge progress for colon and rectal cancer patients, as she was part of a group of survivors, caregivers, and friends that formed the first non-profit in the Colon Cancer Alliance. But she saw something missing. There was more to do. And after meeting policymakers, scientists, and researchers in DC, she learned the key to changing was through advocacy, policy, and research, and founded this organization in March of 2005. She has been involved in many different startups, including in 2011, and the rest has been history from day one. The focus has been to get the voices of advocates heard, and it is their belief that when leaders see and hear those impacted by their decisions, change occurs. For over a decade, they've watched it happen, and there's nothing like a personal story to change minds. Today, Fight Colorectal Cancer is the leading patient advocacy group in colorectal cancer, and they are known for their extremely loud, involved, and, quote, sometimes even feisty voices, and they have no plans of slowing down or stopping until they reach their goal, which is a cure. So for more information, go to www.fightcolorectalcancer.org for your ability to donate today. But we find ourselves about 5 minutes out here, Christian, from practice, and there's going to be a huge talking point immediately before we head over to the race, and that important talking point is the difference between those who have gone out and anticipated and tried to participate in the Majors 24 and those who have not, because you would argue potentially those who have already put hours in that are more prepared for this circuit than the others, but the big difference is fatigue. How tired are they going to be having to race another 2.5 hours almost?
Yeah, I definitely think that's played a bit of a role in why we've got a kind of a smaller field than we're used to, especially in the GTE class. At the moment, there's only about 8 cars in the race. But yeah, having ran, obviously, the full distance race, especially if you're using the same car, you'll have learnt a lot. For example, here, the track conditions are pretty cool. I know that the GTE car doesn't need to change tires for the entire race. I know that they should be able to do that. But, you know, if the drivers haven't actually ran the 24, maybe they're a little bit unsure on what it's like on older tires, and that might play into it. And there's also some, you know, movement around as well. Drivers who ran the LMP2 are now in different cars. Dallas Pataska's driving a GTE. It looks like he's got a pretty good advantage right now. He's got 4/10 over Sangali in second there, but, you know, it's still a different deal. Everything's not quite as it was, and that's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for him and others to make.
Yeah, it's that adjustment that's going to be really crucial. And Derek, one of the things that isn't often talked about as we see the beautiful livery of the 64 car there of Thomas Cope driving around under that Toyota hybrid bridge. One of the keys about these endurance-style races, and especially with split category, is it's the same points for both categories. So if you finish first in the LMP1s, you will score the same points for this round of the championship if you finish first in GTE.
Yeah, you definitely will. And I think sometimes, you know, that can affect car choices as well. And so it sort of surprises me that, you know, in a way that maybe there's not more GTEs, or that maybe a driver who's not looking to take advantage of that. But it's the same points, you're right. So you just got to fight hard for every point. You know, Christian went through the points earlier, and there's still some close battles in there. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, that point system is exactly the same for both classes.
And with that being exactly the same for both classes, everyone's going to be hoping that they get their run sorted and they can score some points. It's a huge opportunity with such a small GTE field that you don't necessarily have to be at your best and you're still scoring a good amount of points. But that does provide a little bit of a difference from what we are traditionally used to when it comes to the lapping process, Christian. Of course, normally when we talk about endurance races, it's the cars that have the least power that often have the most entry. It's not the case this time, so that lapping process might be easier for the LMPs than it is the GTEs this time.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a little bit of a surprise to me that we do have more LMP1 entrants than GTEs here. But as you say, that's going to be easier for the P1s and a bit more difficult for the GTEs, especially, you know, at the beginning of the race when everybody's packed together. It's always tricky dealing with the entire group of a class trying to pass in one go. And obviously LMP1's less traffic for them to deal with, GTE's more kind of traffic to deal with, and there's definitely areas around the track which are, you know, better or worse for being passed as a GTE. The Porsche Curves is obviously quite nice for an LMP1. They've got a ton of downforce. They're able to pass you on the outside, but it's always a bit nerve-wracking when you're a GTE and you've got them going around the outside of you in a corner where you're completely grip limited.
Yeah, that definitely can be very concerning. And Derek, you know, we sit here on the precipice of the race, just about a minute away. Drivers will be looking at, okay, what they need to do. How important are those first 3 laps in establishing a rhythm and a momentum for a race like this, 2 hours and 25 minutes?
Oh, it's very important. You know, a lot of things I talk about, especially in broadcast, is that mental game. That mental game can be very important. You know, you're probably fatigued if you did the 24. Because a lot of drivers love to be up for the end of the race. They want to see how their team did, even if you're not in the car last. A lot of us don't sleep during the 24. I don't know how much sleep Christian got. Christian, did you get more or less than 5 hours of sleep?
Less. Definitely less.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So that definitely plays a factor. So getting comfortable, not making mistakes, you know, it's very important. I want to kind of step back a second, though, Jake, if I can, real quick. Christian, I'm just curious from a driver standpoint. If you're watching this broadcast right now, which you are, and you're running the American region race later, if you see there are so few GTEs and you were planning on running an LMP1, would this change your mind right now?
I mean, it's possible that it could, but I just don't think that that's actually allowable within the series. I think you have to stay within the class that you qualified in, so that's
fair enough. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about
that. Get you away from doing that. But I think it would have impacted throughout the week, though, for sure, because you could qualify all the way up until midnight last night.
You certainly could. Yeah, sorry, my apologies. You certainly could do. And at that point, though, we have to say we are now at a position where we can run through the grid and see how this circuit, the 24-hour Du Mans, stacks up for us today. Sean Campbell, who has been so dominant at the top of the championship, he has himself a great practice time. He's on the front row. He'll have Gabriel Roosto alongside for company. Thomas Cope and Jens Hohmann will start 3rd and 4th, with Ross Banfield 5th and Chris Barrett in 6th position. Elvis Bonello will start in 7th, with Jamie Conway in 8th, the second of the Apex Tech cars, with David H. Baker and Treva Favrovsky 9th and 10th. Overall, just 5 more cars on this row, with Joshua Wolf, Travis Henderson, Martin Pearson, Jacob Money, and Cordell Cologne rounding out the field. Christian, you've got the GTEs.
Yeah, Dallas Pataska, no surprise there on the pole, but alongside him, Miguel Freitas a little bit slower. David Melner, it's a good opportunity for him to gain a lot of points today. He's lining up 3rd in GT, with Ryan Walker alongside him in 4th. Adam Fassiponti in 5th, Mark Redford in 6th, and then Tom Dreiling and Michelle Sangali, who is very fast in practice, rounds out the tail end of the field.
Absolutely, and they're all looking for the right setup to today's race, which you can find courtesy of the Majors Garage, home of free baseline and setups. Get help from any of the garage coaches 24/7. You can sign up now for awesome, affordable monthly subscriptions, telemetry, coaching, and more at majorsgarage.com, or you can use our special discount code MajorsGSRC for 10% off. We have a link in the description below that directly applies to our special offer. But now we have got all of the talking out of the way, it's time to get to business. And this opening section of track is going to be all about just staying calm. It is worth talking about as well, we are in evening conditions. In sim time is about 8:05 just gone. So this race may get dark by the time that we finish off 2 hours and 25 minutes. You can see air temp of 82 Fahrenheit, track temp of 86 Fahrenheit. You would say it's ideal at the moment, but it's going to get colder as this race comes along. And do note that there is already a natural gap between the slew of of LMP1 cars and GTE cars. There are the GTE cars, and they've already given themselves a huge gap. Dallas Pataska in control of that pack at this point in time. But there goes the tricolor, the famous run there of red, white, and blue of the French flag. And as French as it gets, we're going to get ourselves into position as the Air Force flies over the top of this very, very illustrious circuit. Pace car dives in, under control, green flag, and away we go. Campbell was so good off of that start there, Derek. He knew immediately that it was not going to be too wide from Gabriel Roosto, and he wanted to break away early, but look at how aggressive they're being through the early sections into the Dunlop chicane.
Yeah, they're being kind of aggressive back here. A little surprising. Ready got loose.
Just like that, Gabriel Roosto in trouble. He's almost going to get run into. He is going to get run into. Oh, my goodness me. Travis Henderson into the side of him. That is a disaster off the start, and the last thing you'd expect. There go the GTEs. Hopefully, with their machines, they're going to be a little bit cleaner as they fight Christian. Pacha Ponzi side by side with Ryan Walker.
Yeah, and the goal here in the GTEs is to create a gap as soon as you can. As we see second place, Freitas has had to skip across the chicane. He's going to get a slowdown penalty for that. It's going to be huge. You really don't want those on the first lap.
Absolutely not. It's the worst time to get them. It'll take forever and a day to serve that sort of penalty, but disasters early on then in this race. But Campbell leads. It's Cope in second as the group of GTEs now make their way to Tetra Rouge for the first time and run themselves through this very, very important right that leads to the Long Mulsanne. But this straight is going to be very, very important for these drivers. This is going to be the prime place where they need to find their overtakes today. And Derek, you're seeing already drivers are trying to put themselves in the best place they can. This is going to be about placement in the opening couple of laps where the draft is going to be most prevalent.
It's going to be very much about placement, Jake. It's going to be very much about being patient, knowing when to make the move. If you fall out of this draft line, we see there's, what, five, maybe 6 cars in this draft line that we're watching here. If you fall out of this draft line, you will suffer the consequences of that. Now, the issue we're having is there's someone breaking the draft line up front with that blinking, and so that's got to be frustrating for the guys behind that as well. But we're seeing now, is that...
Redford.
It's Cope pulling to the right side here.
Yeah, he's got a slowdown penalty, but we're just seeing here on screen Mark Redford in the 031 with all sorts of trouble. So there's the slowdown penalty. You cannot miss the unicorn on the side of that Audi. But ultimately, Mark Redford's had his own moment. He's had contact with Thatcher Ponti, but that's a disaster waiting to happen there for Thomas Cope, who now falls back into 5th position. He's got Charles Boschel helping him out on the radio as his spotter today, so he's got a little bit of help like that. That will keep him back in momentum and keep him back in the rhythm. And how important is it, Christian, to have a voice in your ear that just calms you down and keeps you in range and keeps you in the right mindset to go out and race today?
Oh, it's massive. I mean, we attributed a lot of our success yesterday and today to kind of having somebody to calm the driver down when things seemed like they were kind of slipping away. I know myself, Brian was talking to me a ton in the first couple of stints because I just didn't want to be as aggressive as the drivers around me were. And he was very helpful in, kind of just keeping me informed in terms of pace and whatnot. And then throughout the night, it was the same thing, but with Nick Ottinger, but doing the same role for Brian. So, yeah, it's very, very important, especially if the race didn't get off to a great start like we've seen for a couple of drivers here.
Yeah, it's certainly been a tough start. So Campbell leads. Ross Banfield has been blinking about like crazy in 2nd position. Jens Hermann in 3rd. But looking back at GTEs just for a moment, it is a lead for Dallas Pataska. He's trying to break away from David Melnarovic and the Grizzly machine. Ryan Walker there in 3rd. Good scrap as well for 4th position because you've got Michele Sangani there, and Michele is going to have to look behind him at Miguel Freitas in the 999 car, who will be looking to try and recover back through the field after his skirt across the opening chicane out on circuit. And Derek, you make that mistake early. You could argue that's the best time to do it because you can go and get away with it then when it comes to the next part of the race, because you've got 2 hours, 20 minutes to go and recover that mistake instead of, say, last lap, you've got 2 minutes to recover the mistake. Oh, hello.
You could say that, though, but it's actually a double-edged sword because what happens right now is you're setting the tone of the race for yourself. And speaking of mistakes, off screen, I do want to say, there's
Henderson.
That's Henderson pitting already. I do want to say off screen, coming back around to the start-finish line, actually Cope suffered a 2nd slowdown in his first lap. So that they've had a second slowdown already. That's got to be frustrating. It's got to get you worked up and annoyed, and that's what you come back to, having people in your ear talking to you. But you're right. You get 2 hours and 20 minutes or a little less now to fix your mistakes. But man, 2 mistakes in the first lap of the first half hour, it can be hard to work yourself out of that and get yourself out of that funk that you put yourself in mentally. And then from there, it can be a real downward spiral.
It really can, and when it rains, it pours. Mark Redford in the pits, takes the spare car for 1, but he still has a black flag penalty to serve. So for 2, he's in doubly the amount of trouble out there in this race. There is Sean Campbell, and behind him now is Jens Hohmann out there in the 919 Porsche. Now, what we saw in the Majors 24 was that only one driver, or one team, I should say, in the top split ran a Porsche compared to an Audi. Now, Christian, what is the big differences in terms of the 2 prototypes between what is the diesel-powered Audi and the fully hybridized Porsche?
Yeah, the main difference is the Porsche with the MGU-H, whereas the Audi doesn't. The Audi just has the MGU-K, and what that means in a practical term is that on the straightaways, the Porsche is kind of, as we see, one of the Audis actually off their Arnage, but the practical differences are that the Porsche can regen as it's driving down the straightaway, whereas the Audi can only do it under braking. But people have got very, very effective at keeping the battery pack charged in the Audi, and they're just able to get some really nice pace out of it. And then there's, some other aspects too. The Audi has got a little bit nicer field of view, I would say. You can see a lot more out of the window, and I know that's important for some drivers. But yeah, there's definitely a preference towards the R18 at the moment. We did see one 919 do quite well in the top split for a while. I do believe it was leading at one point, but obviously was not a contender at the end of the race.
No, very much retired did the PCS Silver team, so that would be trouble for them. And as they move on up then, start their 3rd lap of the race, you can see just how important these battles are. You've got Bonello, you've got Conway, you've got Cope, you've got Chris Barrett here, who allows through Thomas Cope, and a position change then in the fight for what is 4th position on the road. Thomas Cope happy to make places early, but is trying to stay with Jens Hohmann and Ross Banfield, who are 2nd and 3rd, and Sean Campbell already out to a 4-second margin then at the front of the field. So already making that good progress, Derek, already giving themselves the opportunities to break away and to focus on their race right now. But this is what we'll see early on. A lot of draft trains and drivers really searching to try and stay in range and maybe even save a little bit of fuel if they can stay onto a train.
Yeah, that is the important thing. We talked a lot about that, of course, during the 24, when saving fuel can be the difference in how many pit stops you make during a race. But even here, you're going to see it happen. You'll see drivers who want to save fuel, or just they want to get comfortable. They don't want to race yet. They want to feel out the race. They want to feel out the track. They want to watch the track get colder, and they'll race later. That's the mentality you have sometimes. So this is a humongous lead that Campbell has put on the field. Already it's almost over 4 seconds at this point, or actually it's over 5 seconds now. I apologize. So I'm a little surprised that he's put himself that far out so early. He's definitely not in fuel saving mode of any kind, but he's now coming up on the first GTE in the race for himself.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't just yet. And as they take those breaks, they reach the roundabout of Mulsanne Corner. You can see just how aggressive they drive through this section of track. They're all looking to try and go. And when we talk about drivers being aggressive, Jamie Conway was too aggressive, takes a slowdown penalty, and he will drop the position to Elvis Bonello. So as quickly as they go, it's so easy to do. It's a corner, really, Christian, that you would say is one of the keys to getting this track successful. You spend so long full throttle down the Mulsanne straight, you reach Mulsanne Corner, and it's so easy to be just a little bit too early, a little bit too late. As Thomas Coates takes a little bit of gravel out of Indianapolis, you are really hoping that you have got your braking point absolutely spot on for that section as they deal with a couple of straggling GTEs, and that one is Mark Redford.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is a big part of kind of getting speed around this track, is to figure out just how far you can push the limits, and obviously you've got to be careful when you're in a draft line to not go too far with it, because the draft is keeping you there, so you don't need to be going right out to the edges unless you're the leader of the draft line. That's really the time when you've got to push. But telling drivers not to push is just you know, they never listen. And you see right here, Thomas Cope, he was leading that draft line. He's had to give it up because he got to slow down at the exit of the Porsche Curves there.
Yeah, and it's going to be a case of death by paper cut for Thomas Cope if he continues like this. And off the exit, Elvis Bonello with his own slowdown penalty will take it off. So effectively, this is the most amazing game of musical chairs, Derek, I think I've seen in a very long time. Everyone's got a slowdown penalty. It's like Oprah Winfrey's here giving them out for free.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case of what's going on right now. I was kind of thinking the same thing. My gosh, like some of these guys are just being so aggressive right now with these off tracks and with the slowdowns, and you know it's going to be a long day at this rate. I mean, obviously, you know, during the 24 you're willing to take some of them because there was not any incidents, you know, penalty yesterday, so maybe that's sort of ingrained in your head just to use it. And you know, there's a couple of good spots here. I wanted to ask Christian about that as someone who drove yesterday. If you have a slowdown, not that you ever really want to get a slowdown, but where's a couple of good spots in this track to safely and effectively get rid of a slowdown penalty?
The easiest thing that you can always do is to lift earlier before you get to the braking zone. I found that was one of the most effective ways, or especially if you get it, say, on the exit of Tertre Rouge coming down to the Mulsanne. I would just put the car straight into 6th. And yeah, it would kill my acceleration down the straightaway, but it was a very easy way of clearing it. And you can do that out of any of the Mulsanne chicanes. The ones which are really, really difficult to clear are the ones where out of Dunlop, when you come up under the Dunlop bridge, that one's really, really tricky to clear before you get onto the Mulsanne, as is if you grab a slowdown coming through the very last part of the Ford chicane and onto the front stretch. Those are particularly difficult to clear. You don't really have much choice other than to, you know, really just kind of pull to one side and get on the brakes.
So he can see the battles going on, P2, 3 and 4 in GTE, and this is a really good lap for Michele Sangali, who has just breezed up to the back of Ryan Walker and Davin Melnarovic and has just completely driven past them here, Derek. So he has managed to jump up 4th to 2nd over the course of a lap, and I think he's got his sights set on Dallas Pataska's 23, which has run away from things at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Pataska has run away almost 4.5 to 5 seconds up here, but a great run going from 4th to 2nd. It doesn't sound like that many numbers, but in a race we're seeing where everyone's pretty equal and everyone is really calm right now. It's good to see someone making that move and willing to just run here. Something I think we talked about in the pre-race, you know, there's no need for tires, or some of the GTE drivers might have figured it out during the 24 that they're not going to take tires here. So, you know, why not go for it? Maybe he's someone who knows what he has from running the 24 yesterday.
Melnarovic there with the slowdown penalty. That brings him back. Battle still on through the Porsche Curves, and a little bit more troubles then for Ross Banfield then. He goes through. How distracting, Christian, is it to be driving around a driver who's left, right, and everywhere, and you don't quite know where he is with the way that his car is pointed out on track at the moment. And another slowdown for Thomas Cope. That opens up the door for Chris Barrett to try and go down the inside. That very nearly ended in tears, to the point where both Thomas Cope and Jamie Conway still have their penalties. Jacob Money now grabs one as well. And I think the biggest slowdown penalty hit out there is out there at the final, around Maison Blanche, sort of running too wide there. But back to my previous point, how difficult is it to deal with a blinking car?
Oh, it's extremely difficult. We had one behind us towards the end of the race, and it was making us extremely nervous. And you see Thomas Cope still trying to get that position back. And the thing is that this isn't really helping this group right now, because as you can see, Ross Banfield has been able to escape the draft range of this grouping now. So they're all kind of having their own fight, which is exciting for us to watch, but it's really not helping this group. And that's one of the things that you have to be mindful of, is that if you're in a draft line, sometimes it's best to just stay in the draft line. Because if you start trying to make passes and whatnot, you can break it up and you just let cars get away. I mean, Sean Campbell, we know he's extremely fast. We knew he was going to pretty much drive away from the field. But this group of drivers back here, you know, Chris Barrett, Jamie Conway, we used to seeing them fight further towards the front than this, and they're allowing drivers such as Homan and Banfield to just escape them at the moment.
Yeah, certainly are. And you can see here, side by side, so they go down this back stretch, this Mulsanne. Now, here's something that's going to be very interesting out there on circuit to deal with, Derek. It's the fact that this is a public road here in France, that Mulsanne Straight. And on top of that being a public road, you see a lot of tractors go down here, and the natural underneath of the road sinks in more and more. Effectively, what you get now is a crowned road. So what makes a crowned road much more different in terms of how they race compared to a normal road that they would be on and they would be battling on, say, on a traditional racetrack?
I mean, I think the biggest factor is just it's not what you're used to, which is what you said. It's not as smooth of a surface. That's the first thing to look at. You know, when public streets, they're not that. What we believe to be flat surfaces or racetracks aren't really that flat. But you know, I mean, we saw a couple, you know, big wrecks during the 24 hours of coverage on GSRC where cars just hit these big bumps in the road, and you know, they go sideways and they maybe take a car with them or don't. But it's the challenge of it's a public road. It's not that smooth. Yeah, as you said, it's a crowned road. It's just a different surface than what you're used to. Yeah, it's just different. Anything that's different can really confuse a driver and really throw them off for a couple hours.
Certainly could do in comparison to, say, more traditional racing out there. It is Audi, Porsche, Audi in this group. Elvis Bonello driving around in the 919 RSR and looking to try and get the most out of that as possible. They do have that traffic to get around. This is Tom Dreiling that they're trying to get around in the 11. And this is something that we talk about. Cars, especially in that LMP1 category, having to wait for the GTE to take its natural line in order to find a way to get around. Otherwise, you know, you look at this situation, Christian, you had the privilege of being a GTE in a 24-hour race yesterday and today. How important is it for you to be predictable and to dictate pace?
Oh, it's massively important to be predictable, because if you're not, then the closing distance is so fast on the LMP1s that if they don't know where you're going to be, then is a high likelihood of there being some contact or some kind of disruption for either car. So especially on the Mulsanne, I would pick a side very, very early and make it very clear that that's where I was going to stay. Obviously, in other corners around the track, there's really not a whole lot you can do other than just run your line and try and stick in a lane once you've chosen it. That's the big thing, is to not deviate once you've picked the direction that you're going to go.
Yeah, and you can see it as they run around on this straight. Everyone's trying to make sure that they are staying out of range of cars that are going through. That's Adam Thatcher-Ponce that we were taking a good eyes look at as the battle's going on. Just in front of them, Martin Pearson and Trevor Pawrowski fighting for 8th and 9th in the LMP1 category here as they run into the first chicane. And these two chicanes here have been absolutely vital to the way they run. There used to be a track here, Derek, where you would just take the entirety of the Mulsanne, no brakes, no interruptions, and effectively this became a dyno test.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we've put these chicanes here. It slows the pace down at the end of the chicane, or down at the Mulsanne, pardon me. It really helps make this a safer process, and you know, it's just an interesting thing here to see how this works out. I love that we put these chicanes. Of course, the first one now called Daytona. We can talk about that later. But I like the fact that those chicanes exist.
I do as well, and you are really seeing here how the GTEs really have their own tempo. The battle on for third position, Ryan Walker, David Melnarovic just in front of the Pawrowski-Pearson battle. And one of the things that you have to be aware of as an LMP1 driver, Christian, is that when GTE cars in front of you are battling, they do have a right to battle.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was something which, you know, is a problem really for any class, and it goes the other way too. And we were very, very careful to note that when, you know, gaps in the LMP1 class were tight, that we knew they were going to want to make aggressive moves to not get split up and whatnot. And the LMP1 guys have got to, you know, respect that too. Like here, you see this pairing is not going to want to get split up. They don't allow the R18 through on the entry to Arnage, and you know, rightly so. There's no real reason. The Audi can wait until the exit and gets just much, much better acceleration out and clears them easily with no real time loss.
And you can see just behind him, Jacob Money trying to chase down what was Cordell Cologne in terms of moving away through that Audi R18, struggling to find a way through. But now in towards these Porsche curves, Christian, how crucial, what a section of track first and foremost this is. But this is all about commitment. It's the one part of the track where you honestly have to say that you are needing some level of downforce. For all of the trimmed out sections, this is the place that punishes you for going all out.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And one of the considerations we made in our own setup was that we were going to trade off a little bit of straight line speed just to have a better balance, more comfort and just faster pace through the Porsche curves. Just because it's that important to be comfortable through there. You've got such little margin for getting it wrong. Well, we were willing to sacrifice a little bit of straight line speed just for more comfort through that section. And in solo lap, there's actually quite a bit of time to be gained through the Porsche curves, and you've got to really be careful with the setup that you don't go excessively trimmed out in terms of straight line speed, because you can easily lose all that you make on the Mulsanne by being 4 or 5 tenths too slow through the Porsche curves.
Yeah, definitely is a huge element in terms of trying to build together a setup, trying to build together a lap around this place. But Derek, we're talking about these drivers. Thomas Cope now back up into 3rd position, making the pass on Ross Banfield, and now Banfield holds the train up of Barrett and Bonello, and Conway is in there as well. And this is really the next part of this huge conglomerate that races around through the 2nd chicane and looks to charge towards Mulsanne corner. This is the stage of the race where, at least for the LMP1s, they're starting to think about, am I in the right position? Do I want to be maybe thinking about lifting off a little bit more through some of these corners and getting down to a number that gives me an extra lap or so?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about that a moment ago, and I was going to ask that question to both you and Christian. I mean, we know that there's an expectation that Sean Campbell might drive away from this field, pardon me, but he's already put 11 and a half seconds nearly on this field. I'm sort of surprised he's not willing to back that number up a little bit and save fuel himself, honestly. I was wondering that in my head, and I know some people don't play the strategy game. Some people just want to go out and they want to win, and they think their pace is good enough to do it. But I'm surprised.
I just had a look there, and that was really interesting. Yes, they started to think about strategy, but watch Bonello there as he made that run all the way to Indianapolis. It looked like, Christian, he put all his deployment in on that section to get around Barrett.
Yeah, and that's something that we haven't really touched on much with the LMP1s yet, and that's something they can use for traffic management as well. They can override the deploy, and they'll have kind of their own sort of strategies thought out as to when they're going to use their deployment around the lap. So he'll be compromised somewhere else now, but he's used it to get by on and grab a position. And they can do that as well when they're lapping cars. If you think that you can use a little bit more deploy to pass a GTE before you get to a braking zone, it's definitely worth doing it, because even though you'll lose out somewhere else in the lap, you'll obviously not get stuck behind a car through another corners. But it's a lot of management, because you've just got to make sure that you don't kind of just run the battery out completely and then struggle to get it charged.
Certainly agree there. This is a very, very delicate system, and especially around a track like here, Christian, where this isn't necessarily a track known for its heavy braking.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where you would kind of typically think that the 919 would have an advantage, just because it can regen on the straightaways, whereas the Audi can only regen under braking. But it just turns out that the Audi guys have really got it figured out to maximize their regen, and to be honest, it's negating the benefit of having the MGU-H on the Porsche, because the Porsche's probably not making as much on those straightaways as it needs to be to offset that advantage that the Audi's got, otherwise with the hybrid system.
And that can certainly mean that Elvis Bonello can be in a little bit of trouble sometimes on these straights, and he's got to be a little bit cautious as he now uses that deploy to get around Ross Banfield and pick up that position. So right there, off of the 1st chicane towards the 2nd chicane. Now, Derek, why would they choose to make that run between 1st and 2nd chicane more than, for example, into Mulsanne corner, more than, for example, in towards the 1st chicane?
For me, it's about comfort of knowing, you know, that chicane to me is a little safer place to get slowed down and woed up than it is waiting to use this space right here that we're looking at on the broadcast right now. This corner is just a little bit more of an aggressive corner. You have to get slowed down more. So I feel like by using it here, I think you're just sort of, I don't want to say you're wasting it, but I think you're negating some of the benefits by having to slow it down right there. It's also, I guess I will say it's also a longer straight would be the other answer as well.
Yeah, that would also be a relevant bit of information. And what is key as well is that they can only fit those sections of road due to the various turnoffs there. But there's Elvis Bonello, and he immediately pays the price there, Christian, for using all of his deploy early as Ross Banfield decides on that secondary straight to run to Indianapolis, he's going to take that position back. And it is pretty much a give and take game. If you're going to use all your deploy early, you're not going to have much to fight back with at other parts of the circuit where you can go quickly and you can take away quite a bit of time not having the deployment needed.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we saw him using the deploy again kind of the lap before. And certainly when I saw him use it between the first and second chicanes, I figured that was going to make him, you know, kind of charged negative. So he was going to be in a bit of a hole. He was going to have to give it back somewhere. And obviously on the run down to Indianapolis was the place. But now he's not out of touch with Banfield, but he's fallen further back than, you know, the net gain he got from making the overtake in the first place.
And so by losing that time, he does run the risk of losing the draft, the 1 second that you'd feel is the optimal range for it. He won't get much help with the fact that the car's blinking in front of him, but he's still trying to give everything he possibly can in this race. Gap at the front now, 11 seconds, Sean Campbell to Jens Hohmann at this point in time, who is driving absolutely fantastically. It is just starting to creep back down, though. The gap for the race lead overall in your GTE field, it's down to 6.5 seconds right now, Derek. And Michele Sangali running about half a second a lap quicker than Dallas Pataska that last lap around.
Yeah, this is a good thing to talk about as well. We've focused a lot on the LMP1 so far, but these guys really, you know, they don't have the fancy tools of the deployments. They just have to run it down with lap times. You know, some of them have the option of engine mapping. Not that I think they're going to use it. But yeah, this is just going to be a straight up race by these guys, but half a lap faster per lap, that's a confidence booster, especially if you have someone in your ear who's willing to tell you that info. Now, of course, Sangali is not in here with a spotter or a crew chief today, but even if you're just using one of the third-party apps that gives you that information, that makes you feel good when you hear that kind of stuff. That's, I mean, Christian, talk about as a driver for a second. How good does it feel to hear that kind of stuff?
Oh, it's huge. It's funny because if you have kind of a human spotter, what you tend to notice is they'll tell you a lot when you're faster. But if they're silent, it's probably because you're actually slower than the guys that you're trying to keep tabs with. But in terms of the GT race itself, yeah, it is pretty straightforward for these guys. It should be a fairly nailed-on strategy of, say, 14 laps the first stint, 14 the second stint, and then 10 to round out the race. I think it's a little tighter for the LMP1s. I think their race length is going to be around about 45 laps, and I'm told that their stint lengths are around about 11 when they're not being conservative, so we'll have to see how early some of those guys start to come in.
So let me lean that for a second, Christian. So we talked a little bit. Sorry.
So there's a spinner coming out then at the final chicane. That is not ideal in the slightest there going forward. And it looks like Travis Henderson bites a bullet through the final chicane. And that is just a case, really, of being a bit too aggressive on the curbs. He got up on the anti-cut curb and brought the car around. So Travis Henderson's 24 in a world of trouble. Sorry to cut you off like that, Derek, but that there is just a important, I would say, Derek, place where you've got a car that is very good aerodynamically, but maybe not as good mechanically.
Yeah, I mean, what that says to me is, obviously he had that pit stop early, so he's just trying anything he can to make up a little bit of time here or there, and got up on those curves, and just got it loose, unfortunately. So maybe someone who's just trying, in their head to get every ounce of advantage they can get, and just got a little too aggressive in that part of the track.
Yeah, and it's so easy to do as well, Christian. That final section of track, you know, those anti-cut curbs, those big red curbs, they really do stare at you as you aim for the corner. You want to take as much as you can out of the track, but it's also like, no, you don't want to take that much out of the track now.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. The chicanes are so tight that you really want to ramp those curbs as much as you dare. And obviously, it's a bit easier in a GT car. I know that the LMPs have to be a bit more careful. Obviously, they're kind of much lower cars with much more sensitive underbodies and whatnot, so they do have to be a bit more measured with those curb strikes through there. But, you know, just with it being so tight, it's always worth pushing the limits.
Get a look at Martin Pearson for a moment, the number 19. Very nearly caused a 2, almost 3-car accident a couple of moments ago as he was dealing with Joshua Wolf and Trevorowski. I had a look at it on a rewind and had a little think about it, but Joshua Wolf making his way through. But Martin Pearson right now, I don't know if we can get a replay of this. He was all over the back ending the lap there, his end of the 9th lap, Derek.
Yeah, he really was, and that's just a sign of wanting to make some moves, maybe. Or it could be a sign that maybe he was doing his normal stuff, but maybe the cars in front of him were a little slower through a corner or through a straight than he thought they were going to be. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about being predictable and being safe. That just doesn't apply to multi-class racing. You race behind someone. We're going to watch a replay here, I think. Watch this here, Jake.
Yeah, I believe we're a little bit far back. It needs to be a bit further back than that. It was right at the end of the lap where it happened for these drivers. So they're okay here through Tetra Rouge, and it was just a little bit further back than that as well. So we are going to get there here, and we just saw the back end. Here it is. So he tries to look for the inside coming through this second part, gets all up in, and then has to squirrel right over the curbs to make sure that he doesn't run into any trouble. And Christian, you know, if you're in control, you're not going fast, but even for that sort of moniker, as he makes the pass back through here at the Mulsanne corner, even for that moniker, you would say he was really trying to hold it. That's a spinner in the background. There goes Jacob Money.
Yeah, absolutely, and coming through the chicane when you're following a car is even more difficult than it is just solo. You know, solo, it always kind of feels like a bit of a hanging on ride. It's like coming down the hill at Bathurst. You're never really driving that, you're just sort of hanging on, and it's the same experience coming through the final chicanes here, but doubly so when you're following someone. And obviously it looked like you got checked up just a little bit, and it completely throws you offline, and the next minute you're flying over the curbs.
And you can so easily have that happen. Chris Barrett still chasing down then in his race Elvis Bonello in the 919 Porsche, the R18, doing itself a good job. And what doesn't often get talked about, or what is talked about now really, Derek, in comparison to what it would have been 4 years ago, 5 years ago when these cars were at their prime, Audi and Porsche are owned by the same company. They're part of the Volkswagen Group, and that these two cars were made to directly compete against each other.
Yeah, it's always fun when you see that happen. I think the best innovation happens when a company like this does something where they want to compete against each other. That's when you find the best innovations, you find new ideas, you find good competition that way. So I'm always excited to see stuff like that happen. You know, even, you know, maybe it's more of a, when you see teams like, you know, in F1 or NASCAR or IMSA, where there's multiple teams under an organization. They're not all sharing everything. They're all wanting to beat each other. And so I think it's really cool to see stuff like this happen where you're seeing competition within the same organization.
Martin Pearson there making the move on Joshua Wolf. That was for 9th position. That pass as they go through, and they are right now here thinking about that window. They're on lap 11 of their race at this point. And if you've been very aggressive, Christian, you're coming in this lap. If you've been nice with your fuel, you are saving, you're looking to go. There is the RSR 26 of Sean Campbell, who's out to a 13-second lead. He's the sort of driver I'd be looking at going, yeah, I think he's doing 11 laps now, so he can do 3 12-lap stints to get himself home.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that's kind of a smart way of doing it if you're Sean Campbell and you were trying to build a gap at the beginning of the race, because now he can just manage and save fuel. And it's going to be it's much easier to do it this way around than it is to do it the other way around. What you really want to avoid as a class leader is towing somebody else along with you on the same strategy, but he's getting better fuel mileage than you. You know, that's literally the worst case scenario, because even if you're faster, you're not being able to leverage your pace, and you're making worse fuel mileage. So that's the real problem that's going on further back in the pack with Ross Banfield. I do think he's a little bit faster than Manello, Barrett, and Conway that is behind him, but they're just able to pull straight up and use him to drag themselves along the track and, you know, save a bit of fuel, presumably.
Yeah, and it's that fuel saving that is definitely crucial at this phase of the race, as they all drive about and give what they can. Porsche Curves upcoming for Sean Campbell as he tips it in at 270 kilometers an hour and is really fighting against the limits of grip. One of the things that makes the bridge corner there in that second stage, Derek, so scary is you've got that safer barrier on the outside at track distance. There is no margin for error through that.
No, there's not. And, you know, that's, in my mind, one of the dangers of being out there by yourself so far out. I mean, you're 13 and a half seconds out. You kind of, I don't want to say you check out, but you can find yourself in a space where you're comfortable. You're kind of just, you know, you're on a Sunday drive, for lack of better words. You always have to be alert at a track like this, because even one wall hit there, obviously one hit through the curbs, and yeah, we got some pit stops happening, but you'll be in a world of trouble.
Jens Hohmann, now this is surprising here, coming into the pits. He'd actually lost position to Thomas Cope on that lap, so he's really lost a lot of time, about a second or so being in the wrong position, and as such, a few drivers staying out, a few drivers keeping themselves in. No mistakes, just Thomas Cope being uber aggressive on that in lap. And it's the three phases, Christian, that was often talked about with Greg Ahutu. You need to be great on your in lap, great in the box, great on your out lap. He was legendary when it came to that, off and away, full service there for Sean Campbell. But if you're great at those three things, you can win races pretty much at a canter.
Yeah, and it's funny that kind of he was sort of the originator of how important all of that was, and how it took actually quite a bit of time for the majority of the other pro drivers to really catch up with that. You know, it always struck me as a bit of a weird one that people would leave kind of pit in, pit exit practice until the very last minute before the start of a race, and it's actually a really critical part of it, because you can gain or lose a lot in that area. I mean, for example, if you are significantly, say it's a close race and you're just on the edge of draft range, so you've got like 1.5 seconds over somebody, you can be half a second quicker. You put yourself out ahead and out of that draft range, and that's huge, especially at a track like this where everybody is so locked together.
Yeah, now you've got a difference here of strategy out on track in your LMP1 division. All those drivers have come in and made their stop, but you've got battling going on from those who haven't just yet. And it's a case of getting track position for the point where it matters, because suddenly Jamie Conway has moved himself up forward and is now your net leader in this race, passing Ross Banfield, passing his teammate Chris Barrett, and needing to do so at this point in time. And it is worth noting that the back through goes Ross Banfield as they trade once again. Fastest lap around this place, Derek, was also set by a Conway in a Toyota, no less.
Yeah, we were talking about that pre-race, so we were kind of joking about maybe there's a relation, and maybe, you know, maybe he learned something. But yeah, it's a good thing. Oh man, that's close there out of that corner.
Yeah, he was all over that outside curb, Christian, and everyone wants to try and take as much they can out of Indianapolis. It's the only banked corner on camber on track. And how easy is it for a driver just to send the car a little bit too deep, trying to be, I would say, greedy at that section?
Very. I fear Indianapolis at this track, and that's no joke. I don't think I can drive through there anymore and ever feel comfortable. I've had so many issues where either, you know, you get in too hot and the car cuts right and throws you into the barrier on the outside, or you just get in too deep and you run into the gravel and you end up in the tire barrier on the outside. I just don't push it anymore. I really don't. I brake, you know, just before the initial kink, and then I just roll it completely off throttle all the way till the apex. I know some guys will get back to the gas. I'm not one of them. It just frightens me so much. It's such a demanding corner. It's probably the most difficult corner on the track, I think.
That was a beautiful pit entry there by Jamie Conway. He did everything right, closed it right back up again. Pearson and Vavrovsky also dive down into the pits, which should cycle back Sean Campbell into the race leaders. These three, they all hit their boxes, hit their marks, and look to get their service and fuel. There's your race leader returning to the point. Sean Campbell now leading this race once again, as he should be doing. But the key now is where that group comes out in comparison to Cope and Homan, who had got together over that opening stint. Cope just moving through now up into second, and only now are drivers leaving the pits, and crucially, they are as they were between those three, and it looks like they've got a little bit of a jump on the likes of Elvis Bonello, who hasn't necessarily got himself to the front of that group. He's been struggling to get by the lap down Gabriel Roosto there, Derek.
Yeah, he really has. And so, of course, you know, as we're going to see this thing cycle back out, you got to pick your times when you want to be aggressive. I mean, obviously, Campbell's going to work his way back to the front, and technically already has, you know, with the pit cycles. You know, I don't know. I think you got to be a little bit more. I'd be a more conservative as part of the race and be aggressive later, but I'm a more conservative driver as a whole.
We do also have our first GTE in the pits. It's Tom Dreiling making the decision to come in, and that after 40 minutes would imply to me he's trying to use the alternative strategy, Christian, leaving him 1 hour stints between now and the end, or 50-minute stints as it is, because this is such a fuel-intensive track.
Yeah, a little bit surprised to not see him run the tank out completely there, but those cars have got so much margin really to play with on strategy that it's really not a big deal. He's made it far enough that he's not in danger of having to make a splash or dash or anything like that. And I'm a little bit surprised we haven't seen more strategy variation from, say, Ryan Walker or David Malneritz here, because they're tied together at the moment. And obviously stopping early, going maybe 1 or even 2 laps earlier than expected, it's kind of a nice and easy way to break out of that draft lock.
It is, but you'd say at the same time, Corvette versus Ferrari out there on circuit. Of course, you, Christian, have had a lot of information on how that Corvette handles, how it drives. But in comparison to the Ferrari, which is a little sleeker, a little more nimble in terms of a car, as look at this. This is going to be really dicey. 1, 2, 3 is going to go through. How about 4 and 5? You can't shut the door back up just yet. They're going to have to dive through a very scary gap. With the blinking Banfield there, that would have been so difficult. That is so well coordinated there between those two. They were on it looking in their rear view.
Yeah, they were kind of a bit split with the GTs there, and that has happened a couple of times to myself, where, you know, you pick one side and the guy either ahead behind you picks the other, and once you've done that, you really are better off just sticking with it. I know it looks like a bit of a moving chicane, and it is, but at least once you've picked the line, everybody knows what they've got to deal with, and everybody got through that really nicely.
Absolutely, and of course in the GTE field, no better has this been than Dallas Pataska up front, with this incredible battle going on here in LMP1, at this point in time. They moved their way around Michele Sangali in second position, but in terms, Derek, of one Mr. Dallas Pataska, and back in the pits this time. This will be Gabriel Roosto, so this is not anything to be surprised about. Remember, he's a lap down compared to everyone else. Had to come in on the opening lap after getting absolutely T-boned on the opening lap at low speeds through the gravel by Travis Henderson, so he's back in. But to Dallas Pataska as a point, 23 cars running the 2.4 absolutely flawlessly.
He really is, and so much respect for Dallas. I mean, he's doing something that I find to be incredibly difficult. He ran the 24 yesterday in an LMP2. Now he's going to run this race in a GTE just a few hours later. That may sound minimal if you never tried to do it before, if you never tried to run the same race back to back in 2 different cars. But these cars handle differently. They brake differently. Your braking points are different. It's 2 different setups. Let's not talk. It's not like, you just get to load the same setup. There's a lot of respect here. Think about it at home. The only relation I can think of would be like, trying to cut your steak at dinner tonight with a steak knife. And then tomorrow, just, you know, I don't know, cut it
Use
with a butter
spoon.
knife. Yeah, use a spoon. It's not the same. It's very difficult, and I have a lot of respect for what Dallas is doing right now. Of course, the 2.4-hour race does not have any LMP2s in it, so he had to make that change. Christian, I don't know if you've done this before as a driver. If you've done this with two different cars. Hold on.
Oh, that could have so easily have been drama. Too wide on the Mulsanne in towards the braking zone, and on the brakes, Joshua Wolf goes. He very nearly got the 7-10 split there, Christian.
Yeah, he looked like he was going to go for the middle there, and I think thought better of it right at the last minute. But talking about drivers switching between cars, now this might be something that I saw in the middle of the night when I was very tired, or it might be true, and I think it's true. And it's very confusing to me, actually, because Sean Campbell, I am sure, was driving a Ford GT in the 24-hour. And now he's made the stranger decision to go to an LMP1 when he had the car available.
Yeah, and that in terms of how do you manage that, Christian, would have been down to how he felt during the week. And maybe it might have been a situation where you get the example of, I will stay out if the other guy pits. It might have been a case for him of, I will do exactly the opposite of what Dallas Pataska's doing.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can confirm he did run in the RSR by Butt Kicker car, the number 67. Yeah, in GTE yesterday and the top split. So you're exactly correct. That was not just a hallucination from lack of sleep.
Now, what I find interesting in this race, you had the two of Walker and Melnarovich. They were there together, but they have a third car on it as you focus on your leader, Sean Campbell here, coming over the line, starting another lap of his race. But the key I want to focus on is Miguel Freitas in the 999 car for just a moment, because he's now on the back of this group, and this sort of scuppers both of their plans. They were happily drafting and trading with each other and trying to get to their margins, but if they've got Miguel Freitas, you know, it adds a different dynamic in the group. He's just going to be a straggler going, yeah, sure, I'll happily ride your coattails.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting for me is that Freitas actually started second, and we saw him have to serve that slowdown early on, and it just looks like it's taken him quite some time to recover from that, and he's just about on the tail of this pair. Walker and Melnaritz are just totally inseparable. They could just switch back and forth the entire race, I think, because neither driver seems able to, you know, get an upper hand over the other one. My personal perspective on this difference in car here is that the Ferrari is a little bit quicker on the straights and a little bit nicer over the curbs, and the Corvette is a little bit better in the high-speed corners, so say like the Porsche Curves and whatnot.
And so maybe in that final sector, that's where we're going to see that Porsche be good. If it's second in the line, it hasn't quite made the move, it might have to run out of Maison Blanche over towards those final couple of chicanes to really open up that opportunity to go out there and attack. So we'll keep an eye out on that as more racing looks to bring itself forward. Now, we saw those big 4-car trains as they were driving around. They've sort of broken up a little bit here, Derek. It's turned into Noah's Ark sim racing, as I like to call it. Second and third, fourth and fifth, sixth and seventh. They're all pretty much 2x2, hurrah.
Yeah, that's true. Like when the ants come marching in. No, it's a very interesting thing to see when it happens, where you get groups of two working together. Because as broadcasters, we want to start to think, well, are they working together? You know, are they trying to draft each other? Or is it just how the race is naturally broken out? It's really hard to tell sometimes what's really going on. But that seems to be a pretty common thing here, where you get the small packs together, and that's how they race for a while.
Yeah, and it's also a different dynamic because you have to understand now, here comes the look from Chris Barrett against his teammate in Jamie Conway, and they had such an amazing start to the season, Christian, all the way back round one at Watkins Glen. We sort of marked them down as endurance specialists with the way that they absolutely dominated the LMP2 division there, and these would be the sort of drivers that I would believe would be really upset that there's no LMP2 division here.
Yeah, definitely. They were so strong at Watkins Glen in the LMP2, and I do think that that's probably hurt them a bit because, okay, yep, an LMP1 and an LMP2 are similar, but they are so different because of the hybrid system that the whole driving technique's just completely not the same. With the LMP2, it's much more like a regular car where you're just pushing and trying to extract as much as you can at every corner, and the style required is pretty natural. The LMP1's, to be honest, a very unnatural car to drive because you're trying to maximize regen and optimize deployment more than you are really, maximizing the corners. You've obviously got to elongate braking zones, you see there, bouncing over the curbs. But you've got to elongate braking zones as much as you can to maximize the regen, and then you've got to really plan out your deployment strategy to kind of get the most of that as well. And that's where it's just quite different from LMP2, and I do think that might be why we're seeing this pairing not seem as strong as we're used to. We don't really expect to see them about 24 seconds off the lead. And Sean Campbell has been extremely strong recently. He's kind of really come to the fore in pretty much anything he's been racing. So that's not too surprising to see him out in the lead, but it is surprising to see Barrett and Conway not at least in second and third, but back in fourth and fifth.
Yeah, it's a case of what makes this series so special, Derek, because any driver, any day can pick up a victory in any sort of category, because you've got some drivers who are going to come in and race certain events that influence them, that they feel is going to be fun to drive. But at the same time, those who are here for a championship, some tracks are going to suit them, some car track combinations, others won't, as we're going to get a little bit of side-by-side with these two scrapping about once again. They pass around Tom Dreiling, and they'll have Mark Redford now next to jump around. Redford, of course, has also made one stop today in this race, so he's ahead of Dreiling by position, and they both go through. But, there's going to be some tracks out there, some car track combinations, where you're just going to be absolutely nowhere on, and this really is a true test of who makes the best all-rounder when it comes to sim racing.
Oh my gosh, it really is. It's such an eclectic series. I mean, we didn't start, but we had very early we did the Daytona 500, we did the Indy 500. We're here for this 2.4 hour race. The end of the month, we're going to go, old racing in classic NASCARs. We're going to go dirt racing. This really is, in some ways, a championship of the best all-around racer, or the person who can be the most consistent. I would have to stare at the points for all and say probably your points winner for most majors events or major years is probably your most consistent finisher, not the most wins, I would think.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree on that too. And it's not about being the most winningest driver if you are first 5 races, for example, and you're 30th in the other 8, Christian, I mean, you can just ask Logan Clampett this season for eNASCAR just how that sort of feels.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even more kind of wild example of that, I was actually looking at the Porsche Super Cup Series, and that was even more kind of skewed to that way. You think, obviously, championship winner Diego Pinto won one race. Sebastian Job had 7, but Pinto had such a better season overall in terms of race finishes. I think he only had 1 finish outside the top 10 the entire time. And I know that people really like race wins, and I like race wins as well. And it's always fun to be like, yeah, I've got the most race wins, and therefore I should kind of win the championship sort of thing. But I do like the whole thing with points racing, because I think it rewards consistency in a way that's really nice, because sometimes there's drivers out there who are maybe not as spectacular in terms of always going for the win, but they do a really solid job of just picking up consistent top 5s. And, if the championship is skewed a lot towards race wins, then it sort of devalues that ability to just be consistent. And that's where I suppose the Major Series is quite different, with it being so many different car and track combinations. I mean, it's crazy what we've got here. We've got Le Mans with the R18 and the 919, basically the most high-tech things that you can get outside of the W12, which we're also going to be racing. But in between that, we're going to, well, 2 of the more low-tech things. We're going to the 87 cars at Charlotte, and then we're going to dirt modifieds at Weed Sport. So yeah, you've got to really just kind of make the best of the rounds where you're not particularly strong, and that's really important in a championship such as this.
And it goes to a point, and everyone says this when you've got a a driver who wins a lot compared to a driver who just goes to the point. Everyone makes the Senna Prost comparison, and I think the older you get, the more you appreciate Alain Prost as a driver. You just think of him as a kid as like the big bad evil guy who's there, who just suddenly has all the points and always has that ability to go out and win 4 championships, for example, Derek. But it's also the sort of reality where you realize that he was so good as a driver, of just finishing second or third, and just realizing that a championship is exactly that, a championship, a series of races. You don't need to win race 1, race 2 to win at the end, as in comes Dallas Pataska to make his first stop. On the clock, he's gone about 54 minutes or so, or 52, 53 minutes on that stint of fuel.
Yeah, to your point, that's exactly what, in my mind, what a championship winner is. It's people who are always there, and sometimes you don't even realize they're there. That's sort of the funny part. Is a lot of times, people who creep into the top 5 of a race at the very end, those are championship winners. And I wanted to step back for a second and ask a question to Christian, though. When you're preparing for stuff like this, obviously there's things you're good at, there's things you're like, oh, that's on the calendar, really? And you kind of have to balance those two out. So what is the strategy that, for you personally, would you rather practice on the things you're good at and come out of these races with big wins and kind of, survive the stuff you're not good at? Or do you rather practice the stuff you're not good at and try to balance out the results?
To be honest, it's kind of the same no matter what. I would say that some stuff you just have inherently more confidence when you go to start practicing for it. So, for example, I know for myself that the way I'm going to kind of look at this, obviously, we knew we were running the 24-hour as a team, so that we picked a car at the beginning of the week, and we were like, yeah, that's what we're going to pick. We literally dice rolled that we were going to use the C8R, and it was purely based off of one of us didn't want to drive the M8, another didn't want to drive the 488, and so we just dice rolled out of the last 3 cars in GT. That was the only consistency that we had, was that we were all going to do that. And I think that helps as a team. When you've got these split car options, you've got 2 ways of playing it, and one of them is that you maximize team points by doing the different classes, or you pile everybody into the same class so that you can get the most amount of track time with that car. And I would say for myself and our team personally, the way that we look at it is we just look to who's kind of strong in each thing. So obviously with the GTEs, I'm kind of okay in them. Tom is pretty good in them. Brian is exceptionally good in them. So it worked out quite nicely for that. The 87 cars, myself, Nick Ottinger are probably the 2 guys who are going to do most of the heavy lifting there. And then when we go, say, to the W12 at Austria, that's probably going to tip back towards myself and Brian as to kind of being the main heavy lifters in the team. And that's where teams are huge.
There's something really important, though, to develop in GTE. Now, remember, it was a 3-car group for 3rd position that came into the pits. Well, it's only 2 that have ended up together, and it's Ryan Walker and Miguel Freitas. Why? Davin Milnarevic, he has lost a whole chunk of time down on the lane. He is way back. You can see him right back there, driving middle of the road. That is a huge amount of time lost there, Christian.
Yeah, and I can only think that it's one of 2 things. Either he sped on the pit entry, or he took tyres and nobody else did.
I would like to think it's the latter. I took a look at his time, or at his braking markers, and he looked absolutely fine going down on the markers. He was down there, he hit his limiter, he was well below, a good 6 kilometers an hour below the limit that he needed. So I think he's taken tyres. And Derek, this is the sort of car where you look at and everyone goes, oh, it's endurance style racing. You can double stint, you can even triple stint in really cold conditions. We're in double stint mode right now, and ultimately you'd have to say, Milnarevic, it's just one box you need to tick. If you forget to tick it, then oops, you've got tyres.
Yeah, oops, you've got tires, and so that means that your pit stop takes longer. You've lost the field. What feels great, though, if you can pull it off, if you start to pass a couple cars, even if you're not like where you want to be, oh my gosh, that's such a confidence boost to see this difference in tires. But yeah, that's a hard thing to swallow when you make a small mistake like that and know that it can cost you.
I wonder if we can get a replay of Mark Redford. His day is done. Remember, he'd already used his fast repair on the opening lap of the race. His it's with Cordell Cologne. Cologne's 17th lap. It's just coming out the second chicane, and this is the first bit of lap traffic not playing ball. Oops, I'm going to get out of the way. Lap traffic just moves about trying to stay out and ultimately gets tipped. Christian, how important is it just to keep your line?
It's extremely important, and you know, the exit of the second chicane is honestly one of the worst places for it, because you do kind of want to swing back to the left, just not that early. And if I'm honest, I do think that was on Redford, because if he'd just stayed to the right there, he was in the position that the LMP1 was expecting, and everything would have been okay. But because he tried to cut back across, the closing speed is just so fast that there's really nothing that the LMP1 can do but run the car over.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree on that fact. Cordell Cologne effectively got shepherded into an accident, which is not something you like to hear. There's a pass for position, though. Martin Pearson and Joshua Wolf, they've been trading positions, Derek, pretty much all race long, and they've been doing well. But before we take ourselves then over to this stage, we're reaching just about the halfway stage of this race. We're going to take a couple of minutes here, ladies and gentlemen, with the Global SimRacing channel. We will be back with the second half of this 2.4-hour race after this.
iRacing is a sim racing game that combines a true-to-life racing experience with an online community of virtual racers from all around the globe. iRacing offers a multitude of officially licensed cars and tracks, laser scanned with millimeter accuracy. Their car models and mechanical systems are based on real-world physics, engineered in cooperation with manufacturers and race teams. Their skill license system ranges from rookie to pro, ensuring members are always pitted against those with similar skill sets. Members are able to sign up for a weekly race series, compete in time trials, host a private race with friends, and participate in racing leagues created and run by the community. With over 170,000 members, iRacing works in partnership with renowned motorsports organizations like NASCAR to deliver virtual races based on the real-life NASCAR Cup Series, as well as many other series on the NASCAR ladder. iRacing also features team racing, providing a variety of options for members to create and manage their own teams. Race with friends or real-world teammates in full-length endurance events like the 24 Hours of Daytona, Spa 24, or the Bathurst 12 Hour. Additional partners include IMSA, World of Outlaws, Supercars, and IndyCar, allowing members to race in their very own Indianapolis 500, Bathurst 1000, Chili Bowl, and many more iconic events. This is iRacing, delivering the most authentic racing experience short of getting into a real race car. Sign up today at iRacing.com.
Well, you may have seen it picture in picture there with what happened to Chris Barrett there. The 024 Apex Tech car running off the road at Arnage, and that costing him a position. The Global SimRacing channel replay. Now, it looks here like he's taking it absolutely normally, Christian. He's just outbroke himself into the corner, but you could see there he just lifts up and over on that left-hand side curb, and it looks like it unsettles the car under braking.
Yeah, so something that we've seen a lot of drivers do is they'll try and kind of straddle that curb, and they're trying to do that. It's obviously widen out what is essentially a very, very tight corner. But if you transition onto the curb under braking, you'll go from being obviously right at threshold to over the limit very, very quickly, and that's the result. You just go long into the braking zone, and once it's locked, there's just not a lot you can do. Was able to recover, didn't have to do a major three-point turn, but has lost the assistance of his teammate ahead. So he's now going to be pulling along Ross Banfield instead.
Yeah, certainly will. So a new group of two created then here in your LMP1 field, and it will be the battle now for the final spot inside of the top 5 at this moment. You could throw these 4 over a blanket. down the Mulsanne as they look to try and reach. The battle's still on as well. Second and third, mind you. This is about 10 seconds down the road from this. And really, it's been Cope and Homan. And Homan right now, you can see it on the timing tower, has just moved through in his Porsche compared to the Audi of Thomas Cope, Derek. So you're really starting to see here the dynamic between these two. We've seen Thomas Cope probably has the most aggressive raw pace out there of all the drivers not named Campbell. But Homan right now, I think, has just been quietly assertive on his skills. He's been driving that Porsche very well.
He really has. You know, I was sort of thinking during the break, what was the story of the first half of the race? And obviously Campbell's lead is one, but I think Cope is my story of the first half of the race. Remember, how many times in the first 2 laps did we say, slow down for Cope, slow down for Cope? And here he is back in second again. So he's managed those well. He managed the risk. He knew apparently when to take them, and has worked his way back to second despite all those slowdowns he had to serve in the first couple laps.
Yeah, and those slowdowns really did put him back because he's lost about 7.5, 8 seconds in this race just on slowdowns alone. And you think about this as a race where, Christian, you're trying to work out when you get to the end of the race, where are your losses? Where do you sort of analyze what's happened in this race? So Thomas Cope, it's a case of, well, I could be on my own in second and having a really, really nice Sunday drive at this point in time through Pays de la Loire. But at this moment in time, Thomas Cope is in a battle, and really it's of his own accord that he's actually here in the first place.
Yeah, it is. He definitely made too many mistakes towards the beginning of the race, and you know, it's very easy to do. You just obviously kind of have to not do that, and I know it sounds extremely obvious, but sometimes there is kind of a method in wind the pace back just a little bit so you don't pick up a slowdown or whatnot, especially towards the start of the race when everybody was in a line. But Jens Homan has done a really good job so far in the 919. I do think he's on a slightly compromised strategy though. I saw both 919s come in relatively early on versus what the R18s could do. Obviously Campbell came in as expected on 11 along with Homan and Bonello, but the big losers in the pit stop cycle really was Ross Banfield and to a lesser extent Elvis Bonello, and the big gainers were actually Jens Homan and Thomas Cope.
Yeah, they certainly were the big gainers, and you can see Thomas Cope right now with Jens Homan. They came in together, and as they run through these opening sections, you know, you look through and how aggressive they're trying to be through all of these sections, Derek, and every time you go down the Mulsanne, you at least see one cone flying through this section. It doesn't matter how many times you go down, there's always an orange cone that gets kicked up somewhere. And of course, this is the sort of track which says that the orange cone definitely matters. And it always reminds me of that video of dirt racing where the marshal grabbed the cone and gave the cone CPR to go back. That's a big mistake from Thomas Cope in the background, and he may have just lost the draft with that.
Well, you know, and yeah, there's obviously that video from one of the dirt tracks here in the States where the marshal was given the cone CPR and brought it back to life, and we had fun with it. But we have seen a few times in iRacing where a cone does get stuck under a car. You know, and so, and even if you think that doesn't maybe affect your car, it definitely annoys you. It can affect your field of view, and sometimes, although I think with the LMP1, there is no field of view. But, you know, that is something to kind of be careful of, you know, flirting with those cones can be kind of you know, dangerous just from an aesthetic point of view if you're not careful about it.
Yeah, it's more of an open wheel thing that you would certainly think about. There's a little move, and we do have a spinner. Martin Pearson's just gone around out of the second chicane, so that a disaster for him as he looks to try and get himself back going again. He was racing with Joshua Wolf. He got right up behind Christian and then just tapped the back, and oops, around he went.
Yeah, and very, very easy to do again. Obviously, you get a bit of a concertina going on in the middle of chicanes, but it has brought him back to Trevor Vavrovsky now.
And Chris Barrett apparently having another moment, and that is again Arnage.
That is such a weird thing that's going to happen probably, what, 2 out of 3 laps now to see him do almost the exact same thing.
So this is what's happened to Pearson, and he goes through, and he's just carrying more speed there, Christian. He just runs into the back, and by the time he's hit the back, you know, he's got the car unsettled, and he's hitting square in the rear.
Yeah, and you could see the lines were just a little bit different at entry there, and Pearson, if he was solo, was probably going to run a bit deep, but obviously not what he would have wanted, and certainly not what Barrett would have wanted here with, once again, another trip through the gravel trap at Arnage, and this time it is a significant loss because he's now behind both, I believe, Elvis Bonello and Ross Banfield.
So let's talk about that first one for a second. Let's talk about, because I think conventional wisdom, when people watch this from a different point of view, you want to think that if you, oh my gosh, if I hit that guy, I'm going to spin him. But in essence, what can happen sometimes, Jake, is you can actually get so freaked out or maybe slam on the brakes trying not to hit the car that you spin yourself instead.
Yeah, you absolutely can, and that's something you just need to learn. You've got to have confidence in yourself that you can commit to a corner, you can get close. Look at Pearson. He is all over Vavrosky onto the front stretch now through this very long right. Vavrosky stays well out of the way, gets on the brakes and doesn't want any piece of that in terms of a move. So around you go, and for the first time you're really seeing the headlights on in terms of making a difference out there. This sun is setting and this track is cooling, so what you can definitely learn and understand is that these drivers now are seeing a day to night transition courtesy of iRacing.
So with that transition comes a couple of challenges. It can come the weather if the track temp does begin to drop on us, but it can also just change as we see another cone there. I saw one Barrett hit another cone, so I was watching him. It can also change your braking points. It can change what you were using as your visuals. Maybe you had a sign picked out or a cone picked out or a track marker picked out that as the sun sets, maybe the glare hits it different or it's just dark now. And that can be a big challenge for a driver, Christian.
Yeah, it definitely can. Driving tracks at night is absolutely not the same as driving them in the day, and it's funny that it works out that way, but it really is quite a different experience. I know I always thought not Le Mans, but actually the Charlotte Oval always felt like it was a different width to me, whether it was day or night. So that was kind of a weird one, but it gives you an idea as to how different the tracks can feel, and you know, they're forced into running in both conditions with this race specifically just because of how the starting time was set. And, you know, it's a pretty neat idea, actually, to do that. But what it does mean is it means that track temperature is always moving in a favorable direction for them. So the pace is going to go up, i.e. faster, whilst they can see. And the pace can probably still improve in full night as well. But we might see some drivers drop off a little bit if they haven't practiced at night.
Yeah, we certainly could do. Of course, it's so different. It's disorientating when you're out there at night and you've only got the headlights in front of you as any real reference of light through the majority of this circuit. Jacob Money looking to chase down Martin Pearson and Truva Vavrosky just in front of him. This is the fight for the last two spots, really, inside the top 10, with Jacob Money on the outside looking in 11th position right now. So this would be a huge boon for Jacob Money to move Derek inside the top 10, give himself some looks, but we got drivers coming in now and making their stops. Homan in, Cope is in, Campbell has already just made his stop. He's out and away again.
Yeah, so this would be an interesting cycle to see where people cycle out. And you were talking about how, you know, if Money gets around Pearson, how this could be a top 10 run for him, which is always, you know, an exciting thing to say. In racing, we focus on terms like top 5, top 10. But here comes Money down pit road, so he'll give up that battle for that top 10 position.
He'll give it up for now because it's the end of lap 22, start of lap 23. So an 11-lap stint there gets it sorted, but Pearson, of course, has used a little bit less, so he would probably used his 12-lap run, giving himself that room, that margin to go on and attack. And it might be, actually, one of these weird things, Christian, where you come to the last lap and you're going to see on the last lap Sean Campbell dive down into the pits, for example. He's got to give the ultimate splash and dash to get himself around for one more attempt.
Yeah, and I think Sean Campbell's got plenty of raw pace to make it a non-issue, but at the same time I am expecting that he's gonna start trying to stretch the stints out, because he's got so much pace in hand. It doesn't really make sense to not do so, as far as I'm concerned. I would always rather make one less pit stop, even if I have to go 2 seconds slower for 10 laps. It just makes more sense to me to do that than it does to have to come down for a pit stop. But that all depends on if the race goes to 45 laps. If it's 44, then this 11-lap strategy is totally fine.
It all depends on how quick your race leader is. Ross Banfield currently leads. Sean Campbell has almost got an entire pit stop on them. He's only 6 seconds back off of them at this point. A little bit of traffic then in the middle for Martin Pearson. He moves around Adam Facciaponti, gets himself around nice and calmly. Mark Redford is back out there and racing again. Derek, he's 3 laps down on the rest of the field, but the crucial thing for him is he'd need a finish, because these are big points.
Yeah, you need a finish. You know what? And this is something we talk about both in this race and we talk about in the 24. Come back out and finish. There's still an hour and 10 minutes left in this race. Things can happen to other drivers, and you know, I'm always a believer in not rooting for those things, because it's kind of bad karma if you believe in that. But things can happen to other teams, and all of a sudden, first you think you're down 2 laps and you're the guy in last. Man, you finish that out, you can find yourself up 3 or 4 spots just because of things that happen to other drivers, penalties or wrecks or whatever. And so you always finish a race, in my opinion.
Yeah, if you can, you should. And that is something that we have seen time and time again. I am interested to see where certain drivers have come out. Homan, of course, behind Thomas Cope. Now in comes Chris Barrett to make his stop out there on track. He will follow in Jamie Conway in for his stop, but at least for the moment as well, I'm looking at Ross Banfield. He has stayed out an extra lap again, so he's going to leave himself a really short last stint here, Christian, in comparison to everybody else that he's racing against. I think he's looking to go maybe 12, 12, 12 and leave himself a 9 or 10 lap stint. Okay, blinking a lot, yes, so let's take a little look, maybe at a different battle here or there with where drivers are going to come out, so where the 2 Apex Tech cars going to cycle out in comparison. I think, though, it's really interesting to see what Ross Banfield is doing compared to the rest of the field.
Yeah, and I kind of thought that Ross Banfield had lost out on that last pit cycle, but it makes more sense now if he's trying to, extend out to these 12-lap stints, because he just simply can't run at that same pace, and that's why he's moved backwards a little bit. But obviously, if it plays out for him, he should get a net gain on that last pit stop, and that'll cycle him back to the front of this group.
Now,
that's the...
Sorry,
go ahead, Derek.
Okay, so I was going to say real quick that to explain that down in a little bit simpler terms, what we're really focusing on with this idea of 12, 12, and 12 is that last pit stop. No one's going to stay in for a full tank of gas, obviously. They don't need it. But what Ross Banfield is hoping to do is to cut into that time by needing less gas in those last stops, and maybe a Sean Campbell. It won't probably be enough. I mean, I would think there's no way it's enough to win him the race. But that less of a pit stop, that could be the difference in maybe a spot or 2 at the end of the race in a finishing position.
Yes, and you're going to be seeing a lot of drivers trying to get as much as they can out of this as they go forward. Trevor Favroski on the radio here in this 2-wide battle with Gabriel Roosto out there on track. Roosto, of course, a lap down. Henderson here is going to let him have that position. So Gabriel Roosto, yes, he has made a pass out there on circuit, Christian, but he's got one issue with that pass, and that he's got to go around another 13.5 kilometers to make another pass.
Yeah, to be honest, it's obviously kind of a race of what could have been for both himself and Travis Henderson. Just so much damage literally on the first corner of the race, and it's put both of them pretty much out of contention. Henderson is 1 minute behind the next nearest car, Cordell Colon, who also had an incident. He had that wreck with Mark Redford, so he's just shy of about 40 seconds behind Jacob Money. But for both Roos and Henderson, it's just now a case of logging laps. So presumably that's why Favrovsky is, I don't want to say upset, but maybe questioning what's going on here.
How close does Thomas Cope want to go to the barriers at Arnage? He outdoes himself at Arnaud's corner, and I wonder if we can get a replay of this. He is so fortunate that he got that car slowed and turned, because he may have had to have done a 3-point turn in a gravel trap, Derek.
I mean, more than that, if he didn't get the car slowed down, we'd have had to have maybe towed him out of there. I mean, watch this here. He's going to come down here into the corner.
Oh, you can see
that's
just how close.
Yeah, you know, and that's the difference with what we were seeing earlier. I think it was Pearson we saw earlier have the troubles in the same corner. And I thought to myself at the time, you know, it's a good thing he was slowing himself down. So I thought, man, the other option is you throw yourself into that corner. And maybe that's what he was trying to avoid right there. Yes, he had to slow down both times. And yes, he had to lose some time on track and in position. But it was less scary than what we just saw right there with Cope.
So a lot of drivers in. Ross Banfield into the pits. He's the big name of all that they're in. Pearson now dives in. Vavrovsky also now at this point. And Jamie Conway is going to come out just ahead of Ross Banfield. So that's going to be interesting. Jamie Conway, of course, number 42 machine. The answer to life, universe, and everything in comparison to the 777 car. That's the sort of race you're looking at. How much time can you save on Jamie Conway getting yourself through? Now, the worst part about this strategy, Christian, is he's got no more draft partners to go and leech off a bit of fuel with. He has to do it now purely on lift and coast.
Yeah, that's going to be the difficulty for him. And obviously, this strategy is, I don't know how I feel about it, because he's, to my kind of stance, losing too much time to Cope and Homan in second and third. You know, he's over 10 seconds behind them now. He's more like 15 seconds behind, and even with a short final stop, it's not going to close that gap up. So I'm not convinced that this is the way, if I'm honest, but we'll just have to see.
There is Miguel Freitas on screen trying to stay with Ryan Walker. That gap has been fluctuating in and around 1 to 2 seconds at this point in time. And I think Miguel Freitas is just starting to see here, Derek, that rubber band break, and he's going to need a little bit of genius over the next 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah, you need a lot of genius probably to make anything work here. I mean, we're kind of at this part of the race now where I think a lot of drivers are settled into a strategy. You know, we're an hour and 4 minutes to go. So, I mean, wherever you are, you sort of made your bed. You've got to lie in it. So now if you've got to conserve fuel to make a strategy work, that's what you got to do. It's almost hard to think anyone's going to find something new to do, but they haven't done in the first hour and 24 minutes already.
That versatility, especially in the GTE field, is very, very difficult, Christian, because you're going 53 minutes or so on a stint as we get a bit of side-by-side here in your LMP1 category. This is Jacob Money through on the inside of Joshua Wolf as they makes the pass into the second chicane and making that run towards Mulsanne corner. That GTE field, they've only really got about a 15-minute window. Uh-oh.
We've had an incident. Chris Barrett's been spun around going into Indianapolis. They were both trying to pass Ryan Walker in the GTE, and the other car involved Alvis Bonello.
Yeah, that's a huge one, and we need to back it up because this is a case of Bonello going basically from leagues away. There is a tap on Ryan Walker, but from leagues away into Indianapolis, this is huge. Now, you talk about opening opportunities. He closed up, he lifted off at Mulsanne corner, but here, turn and brake, sees the opportunity. He just outbrakes himself there. He's trying everything to stay out of the way. The car straightens up. Ryan Walker's lucky he's still got a car. Only a minor tap on the front for him, but that's some good sportsmanship there by Bonello. He could have just driven off there, Derek, but instead he chooses to redress the place.
Yeah, I mean, he does. That's being aggressive and trying to find a spot, maybe thinking you can make it stick, or, you know, sending it in to see what will happen. That's disappointing to see in some ways, though.
Both cars in the pit lane now. Barrett having to pit, and Joshua Wolf's just had a huge off at the entry to the Porsche Curves as well. He's gone straight on into the fence.
Oh, he's not happy. He's immediately on the radio there to Jacob Money. And that, I think he might feel like he was squeezed there, had nowhere to turn. It's a massive, massive accident. You can see the front completely ripped off of his Audi as he tries to limp that car through over the bridge turn and back home. So another little look needed And it's at this part of the race where it's starting to just break down. You're going to see here, Money's going to go and try and get himself through and find the right moment to make the pass. But you can see there, he was just squeezed out in the wrong position. And then all of a sudden, uh-oh, Spaghetti-O, there's a huge wreck into the wall. Derek, just wow.
Yeah, I was trying to think about it for a second. It's interesting, though. This is a time when you have to make a decision as a driver. And yeah, you could say, wow, it was a bad pass. And wow, you know, maybe he shouldn't have been that aggressive. But as a driver now,
Cordo Colon now in the wall at the final corner. And he's buried in the tires, just got away from it.
Yeah, I see that here. Look at that. I was watching the pit stop there. Didn't see that. But you know what? Let's transition this for a second and talking about, I have this belief that when the sun comes down, and when the sun goes up in an endurance race, crazy stuff happens. Like it seems like clockwork. And now we're, you know, what are we, 9:30 in sim, so we're, you know, really getting to the point where the sun's coming down, visibility is getting less, and craziness is happening everywhere.
He's got again. Yeah, this is again, and I wonder if he's done something to the car with that hit. He's taken a tow. Now, what's got him here, Christian, now this is the interesting bit. He goes on this first curb in the final chicane. You just look at how he attacks it. It just looks like the compression damping there, the way he goes off, is that the car just bounces on the rear tires and suddenly he gets that mass influx of grip that throws him across to the left.
Yeah, it looked like he just tried to cut too much of the curve, and then when it landed, it just fired him straight off to the left, and obviously then the subsequent contact with the wall has clearly broken the car because he spun as soon as he got to Dunlop. So that's unfortunate. Obviously not the first incident he's had today, but the first one of his own making, I think. And you know, it's surprising. It kind of all sort of settled down a bit, and in the space of about 5 minutes, it all really kicked off.
Yeah, this has been the sort of race where it's been very quiet early on, but suddenly with an hour to go, everyone's been in a little bit of a pickle. One driver who stayed out of trouble, though, this guy, car 23, Dallas Pataska. This is the sort of race, Derek, that he needs to get his championship back on track.
No, I mean, it definitely is. He's got a 14-second lead over second place there with Singali. So that's a great job by Dallas. Something I wanted to touch on, though. We talked about this with a different driver earlier. Remember, you asked about Redford and staying out, and I said, you know, things can happen. Think about this from Gabriel Roosto's point of view right now. He right now is, you know, 15th in class, 1 lap down. But with how many LMP1s we've seen have damage or have issues in with the last 4 minutes, he's probably eligible for a top 10 at this point.
Definitely could be happening very, very soon. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. How does his race now get affected by all of what has been going on and drivers making these mistakes? And again, it's that concentration value, Christian, which we've been talking about, how drivers either A, don't have the experience, or B, are too tired from Majors 24.
Yeah, and it's definitely gonna play a role. I'm certain it'll play a role. Oh,
there's another one.
Another spin from LMP1 there, but looks like no other contact involved this time. So a time loss, but otherwise no big deal. Unfortunately, Josh Wolf again recovering from that prior incident. He did have his free car available, but it's not going to help him too much given how much time he lost involved in the incident itself. But yeah, in terms of the whole concentration and race length and everything, it's totally going to be a factor. I think it was absolutely a factor in why the field is a little bit thinner than we're used to seeing here as well. And it wouldn't at all surprise me if by the time we get to the end of the race, most of the drivers are, to be honest, a bit sick of seeing this track. I know that always tends to happen around about the time of the Daytona 24 hours as well. You kind of run the track so much that by the end of the 24, you're just kind of done with it. You don't want to see it again for another year.
It's a funny thing. It goes in stages. Everyone's tired of Daytona in January, Bathurst in February, Sebring in March. In April, it's the Nürburgring. In May, it's Indianapolis. In June, it's this track, Circuit de la Sarthe. You get over, you know, July, August, September. By September, everyone's going to be sick of Road Atlanta. That's the sort of way it goes. Racing has a lot of staples when it comes to endurance, and the amount of laps you need to put in to be absolutely on it, as Homan now ahead of Thomas Cope moving up into second position. This is crucial in terms of this race, but it's very cyclic, Derek.
You know, it's funny you say that, and I think about, you know, from a team aspect and, you know, helping run a team, how you're right. People get tired of tracks and how we, you know, God, I don't want to touch that track again for 2 weeks at least. And, you know, here these guys are, again, doing it, you know, mere hours after the 24 finish, when a lot of these guys were in that race and maybe did or didn't finish the car. But yeah, I mean, you know, I suspect a lot of these guys will be done wanting to see this track by the time it's over.
I'd certainly agree. There was just a slowdown penalty there coming out of Maison Blanche for Thomas Cope, and that is the most innocuous place we have seen a slowdown penalty. It's not often, Christian, that we see slowdown penalties on the outside of corners, but of course iRacing feeling the need that, okay, we absolutely don't want people attacking off of the outside of Maison Blanche. Let's put a slowdown penalty there.
Yeah, it's kind of the one that I found really difficult to avoid. That and the one coming off in Turtle Rouge as well. That's the same sort of deal where it's on the outside and you always want to push the limit. But you know, it's weirdly that specific slowdown I feel like is probably one of the easiest to clear because you have a short straightaway to the final chicane. In an LMP1, you can just avoid using the hybrid boost and, you know, kind of skim off the time that you have to give back pretty easily. But it is one which got us personally quite a few times in the 24-hour, just because obviously being a corner exit, you always want to open it up, and it has to be a slowdown because there's so much paved runoff there that a 1X doesn't really do the job at stopping people from cutting it.
No, I'd certainly agree in that respect, and it does make life very, very difficult as they go on through. In terms of drivers who have lost out quite a bit recently, one of those drivers is Elvis Bonello, who of course had that incident earlier on chasing down Chris Barrett, had to come in, take some service and get back going again, but that service has really cost him because he's now back down in 9th position in this race. So he took the spare car and just jumped, no other things necessary with that. But he jumped in with Gabriel Roosto. He's still in and around that same sort of pace, but he's now got work to do because it's 4 seconds to Money, and it's then 6 seconds to Chris Barrett, who came in along with, and then Martin Pearson out of nowhere is in 6th position after his dramas and troubles over the course of this race. So you're really starting to see how drivers who were up there and looked like locks to be top 5, top 6, top 7, all of a sudden are now having to really work for it, Derek.
They really are. Now, the thing to think about, though, as well, with, you know, coming in and taking that spare car, is I believe he did it on his lap 25 to 26. He's off cycle now, and that's going to be frustrating as well for him, probably, right?
I don't think he actually stopped and took any fuel or any tires. I think he just stopped in, got a free car, and just ran again.
Okay, that may be as well. So that'd be worth thinking about. But yeah, I wanted to ask Christian for a second, though. You know, we talked a lot about team racing and being, you know, how you feel about this, working as a team, and how you feel about this track at this point. I was curious. You know, you're obviously well known within the iRacing community for setups and knowledge of the cars. Coming into a race like this, you obviously build a team setup, or you helped build a team setup. For a race like this, though, now you're in here solo for yourself for 2.4 hours. Do you build your own setup for this race? Is it different? Do you just use the same setup? What is the process for that?
We compromised so much to kind of suit everybody with our setup. Myself and Brian went back and forth a lot because Brian was very happy to have a car that was much freer than I wanted it to be. I was very, very particular about what I wanted for braking feel. And it's funny because for a while we were kind of a bit at opposite ends, where I think he thought that what I wanted was, you know, kind of a bit too safe. And I thought that what he wanted was a bit too on edge. But by the time we got to the race time, we'd actually converged basically at the same point. So I would say that we're just going to use the same thing. And that's really how we've ran every race except for Indianapolis. Indianapolis was the only time we split setup where myself, Nick, and Brian ran the same thing, and Tom ran something different. But otherwise, yeah, we built the We build the setup together. If anybody wants to make their own tweaks to it, then that's fine, but we always kind of cross-share it back and forth, and more often than not, we all end up running the same thing.
Travis Henderson's had a little bit of a run-off over at the final corners. He's okay in the 24, and it brings himself back in. 51 minutes remaining then in this race, and it is still getting a little bit close out there in terms of the battle for second and third overall. But look at the gap out in front. It is 47 seconds here, Christian, over to Sean Campbell. And at this point in time, you know, he could win this race by half a lap at an ease.
Yeah, and I don't think he's got any considerations for having to, you know, make another stop at all. If he has to make a splash and dash for one lap, it's going to make totally no difference to him because he's got such an advantage. He could take a stop for probably 4 tires and a full tank, and he'd still come out as the leader.
I mean, he could limp around with 3 wheels and a rusty spoon in the back of the car, and he'd still be absolutely flying out there, same pace. So he's certainly got everything that he needs out there. Now, there has been an issue for Mark Redford out on track. You can see him, he's last position running that very wide, very chunky BMW M8 GTE. It's a wonder, or I would say it's no wonder with that sort of car why Cordell Cologne couldn't get past him earlier on, because he's driving in an M8 which blocks about half the track. But he's just had himself a drop, get himself back into service and back driving again. That's cost him an extra 2 laps, Derek. He's now 10 off the pace.
Yeah, at this point, 10 off the pace. This is hard to keep yourself motivated. I mean, they're running, let's just take a look here in the GTEs, pardon me. Almost 4 minutes a lap. So, I mean, he's 10 laps down at this point. It's hard for him to think that he can make up too much more, but this is demotivating at this point for Mark Redford, I'm really sure.
Certainly is, and I tell you who has been impressive over the last couple of laps, Christian. It's been Jamie Conway in 4th position. He's pulled that gap down to Thomas Cope from 7 seconds now to just 4.
Yeah, and that's kind of, to be honest, sort of what we've expected from the Apex Racing Tech guys, that they would go up there and challenge for the second spot. Certainly not going to catch Sean Campbell today, but I do think they can challenge for that second spot. But is it too late in the race to start trying to close this down? And is it putting him at a strategy disadvantage to do so? Obviously, they were, you know, working together with Conway and Barrett for a long period of time, but Barrett's now out of contention. He's over a minute behind this grouping, so he's unable to assist in any way, really. So can Conway run down Cope and Homan on his own and without putting himself at a strategy disadvantage? I don't know. The pace looks good, and it looks like he's actually towing Banfield along with him a little bit.
Yeah, definitely looks that way. So he is certainly flying. Now, we have just had a pit stop in GTs going through, and it's very surprising right now, Derek. It's Miguel Freitas who's coming in the 99, driving in now as well. So this is an early undercut from Miguel Freitas. He wants to get in, get his strategy sorted, and find the pace. And he's lucky, I'd say, on Mulsanne, because he's found Adam Facciaponte.
Yeah, this is an interesting strategy and something I think more American road course racing is used to, where we back up our pit stops and we sort of math it backwards. Listen, there's no cautions in this race. There's nothing that's going to mess up your strategy. So some people prefer to back up the stops and put new tires on for that last stop and be ready to go. It also kind of puts you out of pit lane traffic. It puts you out there by yourself. Less chances of just an accident or a car incident. So it's an interesting strategy. I had kind of wondered about this earlier, and I thought, man, no one's doing it. And that's more of an old NASCAR strategy where you do the math backwards. And a lot of drivers used to, what they do is you would stop at the, you wouldn't run the fuel out the first time. You'd stop at lap 5, lap 7, lap 10, and pit from there.
Sangali in trouble from second in class, was just about to get lapped by the leader in the form of Sean Campbell, and he's put himself in the barrier out of the final corner, slid it off, just about avoided Campbell and found the tires at the final corner. This is definitely worth the replay, Christian, because it nearly threw everything in trouble, and there's more trouble down now over at the Mulsanne corner.
Yeah, I believe that's Fassiponti that's gone wide there. But coming back to that incident that happened at the end of the lap, yeah, very, very fortunate for Sean Campbell that Sangali actually pulled the car back the other way. You see here, actually okay, really. It's just a case of that he got the right rear out in the gravel and just got on the power, and it nearly got away from him, came back across the track and into the path of Campbell. Fortunately for Campbell, he was able to pull the car far right anyway, but Sangali did pick up some damage for sure by doing that. Not sure what happened with Fassiponti there on the entrance to Mulsanne corner. Looked like the car was doing what he expected and all of a sudden just pulled off to the right.
And this is Tom Dreiling as well. Oh, through the Forest S's. Pull on the binders. How has he kept that out of the barriers? So 3 different incidents happening over the space of about a 1 minute stretch for the GTE drivers. And I tell you what, when it came to Fassiponti, Derek, you know, there is a farmhouse down there at the Mulsanne roundabout there, and it's almost like he was trying to make a break for freedom.
Really was an old chicken run situation, if you understand that reference. Yeah, I was looking at it again to see what happened. I know we were all kind of focused on the Sean Campbell, you know, near incident when Fassiponti got off the track. I think he just kind of he forgot to brake, honestly.
Could very easily happen. Yeah, I mean, you miss your point, really, by 5-10 meters. You're going to be sailing through the corners, and there's not much that you can do. Battle on, then, on track. This is Banfield versus Conway in the fight for 4th place, and they are clawing back in Thomas Cope, who is losing ground to Jens Hohmann, who was pulled away to the tune of 2.5 seconds out there now at the 2nd position at this point in time. So, Christian, now you're starting to see Thomas Cope, who I think doesn't have a car that's set up for the cold conditions.
Yeah, and I'm a bit surprised by this, because towards the beginning of the race, we obviously thought his pace was very, very strong, and it was mostly compromised by his own mistakes. But now, after being tagged onto Jens Hohmann for such a long time, it looks like he's just dropped away, isn't able to match that pace, and now he's got Conway and Banfield running him down. And Conway and Banfield on this, I want to say, certainly Banfield, not so sure about Conway, but Banfield on a better strategy, who will leapfrog them regardless of whether he passes them on track or not.
Well, now that's going to all come into mind. Thomas Cope will definitely want to be aggressive on his defense. Now, he is a driver who does have a victory this season, does Thomas Cope. I believe he took the Daytona 500 2nd round of the championship, so he knows what it's like to win in these series, and this is where he's starting to find something that definitely works for him, Christian.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, we've seen this quite a few times, actually, in the major series with drivers who show pace and win races and, you know, but maybe are a little bit rough around the edges and take a little bit more time to kind of become consistent contenders. I could think of a couple that we've seen that from, especially in the Americas region, actually. Mark Stevenson's driver, who's been in the Sportsman division, dominated it, and then moved up to pro last season, was fast, but a little bit rough at some tracks, and has, you know, continued to improve. And we've seen it here as well, really. I know we think of Pataska for other series and whatnot, but even his consistency has improved significantly over the past couple of years.
So Sangali in from 2nd in GTE. No surprises there. Expect him to take his spare car and run away again. But this battle certainly on now. 3rd, 4th and 5th. And I will say as well, it is starting to close up for 6th and 7th as well. Chris Barrett here, Derek, in the sights, has himself 2 LMPs in front of him. One's the lap down Gabriel Roosto. The other one is Martin Pearson, the car he wants to race.
It is, but the thing to note about that battle as well is if you back up one more car, Jacob Money is getting Barrett in his sights a little bit too. But yeah, Barrett's trying to run down a car here and see if he can maybe pick up P6 and see what can happen with it. I'm curious to see if anyone else tries that alternate strategy, by the way. You know, the one we saw with the GTE. We're not there yet. I mean, we're 12 laps into a stint at 3. It's about 36 minutes, about 7-8 minutes from now. I'm curious if any LMP ones want to try that same strategy of pitting in early and not running the tank empty. But yeah, we're watching as we're navigating traffic here and doing a good job of it overall.
They certainly are doing a good job. There is Thomas Cope just holding things off and just staving off the danger for now. But this is the time where Jamie Conway is going to really close down the gap. The lights fully on as we hit sunset. Here comes the move then. Over to the inside from Conway, and thank you very much with 41 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock. He jumps up, runs a little too deep though, going through Mulsanne corner, and that might have just opened the opportunity for the 64 machine here, Christian, to come back and attack, because he's going to think about it through the Golf corner. Moved maybe to the inside. He's run out of top end though, and he'll have to sit behind and wait. And now here comes Ross Banfield. He might go for the 2-for-1. Here we go. This is endurance racing, and that is beautiful from Banfield.
And then Cope managed to slice back around the outside of Conway. It's very tight coming into Indianapolis there. Cope was pretty aggressive with that, if I'm honest. He put a lot of faith in Conway to, close that door on him. But yeah, Conway looking really strong, and then all of a sudden is actually at the tail end of this grouping.
Yeah, it's amazing sometimes how that can work, Derek. One moment you're thinking about grandeur and you're thinking about third place. The next minute you're fifth, and you went, well, hang on, that wasn't how it was supposed to go.
Yeah, so the important thing now is, what do you do? How do you react to it? How do you recover from it? We talk a lot about this being a mental game, and it really is. How do you keep yourself calm? You go, okay, you know what? They got around me. No big deal. As I come up on a GTE here, and they're going to come through the final corners here.
Yeah.
And that's going to create a gap, I think.
It is, and it is your class leader, and that is the gap that absolutely was wanted by Ross Banfield, and it opens up the door off the exit here. Conway trying to figure out a way to go through on Thomas Cope. He's not quite got it here as they go through this very tough first corner on the brakes into that Dunlop chicane, and as they now traverse up and back down the hill to these lefts and rights. I always remember McNish's huge accident through here. Then this is going to be an important place to get it done. Mark Redford's day completely done. He's pulled the car off and retired it from the end of the pack. So his day all done and dusted. But Christian, you saw that, but all of that gap that was made up by one Mr. Ross Banfield, that opening section has been clawed right back here by Thomas Cope.
Yeah, Banfield's kind of exit out of the final corner didn't look too impressive. I felt like he should have been able to use Pataska as a pick to get out of the draft range. But I just wonder if he just used all of his deployment on that run down to Indianapolis. He was quite far back exiting Mulsanne corner, and then all of a sudden he just blew past both R18s. So I've got to think he's now at a bit of a deficit, and that's why he's been easily clawed back in.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Let's try and have a little look further back, though. Well, actually, before we do that, here comes another little look at a move as Conway's going to dive to the inside and just about scythes his way through on Thomas Cope, moves up into fourth position. I do want to keep an eye on Pearson and Barrett in terms of their scrap right now, because that suddenly looks like that may, Derek, get into draft range.
Yeah, he's not far off it at this point. I was taking a look at the leaderboard to see. But yeah, no, he's not far off of it to be in that outside of that draft range, maybe pick up that pace and see if he can make a move here in the last 38 or so minutes of this race. I mean, well, so we're talking about, you're talking about 1 to 1.5 seconds is where you want to be for that draft range to really start to pick up. And of course, the closer you get, the more it is. But sometimes just sniffing that draft will have this really weird effect on a car where you just pick up so much speed, and it's a great feeling when it happens.
It is a great feeling. Now into the pits comes your overall leader, Sean Campbell. So he goes 12 laps on, he goes another 11 laps on that stint, end of 33, start of 34. He now puts himself in a position where it's his time to jump in with the number 26 machine, and this is the all-important phase now of his race. He pits in with 37 minutes on the clock. I'd say that is right on the cusp of 44 laps here, Christian, give or take.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be pretty tight. Obviously, he's got so much in hand, it really doesn't make too much difference for him, but it's more about what the others in class do. And whilst we were taking a look at that, Jamie Conway's actually lost out a bit. He really blew through the entry of Indianapolis, and it's actually disconnected him a little bit from the back of Thomas Cope.
Let me talk real quick. Let me talk real quick. I'm surprised by Campbell. Like, I know we've talked about this whole it's only a splash of fuel, but man, every time you come down pit road, you face the chance of speeding, you face the chance of an unsafe exit, you face the chance of anything. Any black flag will completely rid yourself of that margin you've built for yourself. When you have that kind of lead, I struggle to say maybe it's a little bit of hubris to think that you can't back up the car and cut out a pit stop out of this race. I struggle really hard with that, actually, guys.
Well, the difference, though, is he doesn't need to. He's a pit stop ahead. He's just come out 6 seconds ahead of Jens Hermann. So I'd say that he's, by this point, Christian, cut out the pit stop on track.
Yeah, he definitely has. I mean, the pace has negated any kind of strategy considerations for him, so he's, nothing is going to be worse for him. He's basically got 40 seconds in hand anyway, so even if he decides to save the last stint, well, he'll lose some time, but he'll get it all back when they pit, or he can pit when they pit, and he'll still be ahead because his stop will be so much shorter. I do agree with the premise of cutting a pit stop out, though, entirely, just as a thing of don't get the speeding on entry, exit, and stopping in the box and all that kind of thing. So I think that's fair, but pace-wise, he's negated it anyway, so I guess in a practical sense, it doesn't make too much difference what he does.
No, I agree with that. No, sorry.
Final stops have just come in for GTE. Pataska out and away again has made his stop. Now, where does Ryan Walker come out in comparison to Michele Sangali? He's still traversing. Sangali, I think, is going to be okay here in second position as he drives through. Expect this to be a long lot of service. A lot of fuel's got to go in that car. And Sangali is going to comfortably move his way forward and up into second position once again. Melnarovic is also going to dive into the pits from fourth place. So a lot of pit stops happening and at the right times for a lot of people. It will be interesting to see because of that early stop there, Derek, where Melnarovic will come out in comparison to Miguel Freitas.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see, and also see, I'm excited to see the pace difference too, because I'm assuming, although I didn't go back to the stop and look, and I should have, and I apologize, with that early stop at the beginning of this fuel run, you would think maybe he didn't put tires on. I would think that why would you not if you weren't going to put tires on unless you just wanted to be out of traffic? I don't understand. Like, I started to say you put tires on, but I thought, no, wait, the GTEs are triple stinting. You probably didn't put tires on it.
Yeah, that definitely could be the case. Melnarovic leaves his box, but he's going to be too little too late because through goes Freitas. And that gap, a little bit less than what it was, which is crucial for Melnarovic and his chase now if he wants to get fourth place in this race. But he's got work to do if he wants to catch Miguel Freitas. He knows this is still a long way away. Now in comes the likes of Homan and Cope and Conway. They all dive into the pits at the same time. Ross Banfield, no surprises, he's staying out. Christian.
Yeah, and I think that the guy who's really going to be upset with himself is Melnarovic for taking that set of tires because he just didn't need to do it. He lost 24 seconds for no gain whatsoever. The track conditions are just so good that you can make the tires last the whole race quite comfortably in GTEs, I would say. So he's just had that deficit that he's not really been able to do anything with, and it's a bit demoralizing for him because he's had to carry it for the majority of the race. But yeah, other LMP1s, obviously Banfield's still out there. You see Homan exiting the pits with a decent lead, actually, over everybody else. Cope is significantly further behind. Conway is struggling to stay attached to Cope as well.
Makes you wonder here if Jens Homan's maybe underfield the car a little bit there, Derek.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, man, how do you pull that off? Like, did he underfield it thinking I'll be in the draft, thinking others were going to do it as well? But yeah, I mean, you don't typically luck out and gain time on pit road of that nature without something being weird. So that'll be a story to look on. Maybe he thinks that we're going to go one lap less due to Campbell's pace. I'm unsure at this moment.
Well, on top of that, Chris Barrett's down in the pits as well, so he's going to be interesting in terms of where he comes out in regards to Money and Bonello, who are there at the moment. Another car jumping in, that's David H. Baker looking to make his stop, leader of the Legends class out here in the Majors Series, especially for European split. But this looks like for Chris Barrett, he is out and away and crucially ahead of where he needs to be with Money. But we are very firmly in final stop season at this moment. Everyone knows that if they want their races to work the way that they've intended them to, this is where you have to make everything come together. The final half an hour of this race, where it can get very tiring, Christian.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's going to be most interesting is to see where Banfield slots out in amongst this group. Is he going to come out right in second spot? Is he going to have jumped as far ahead as Jens Homan has? Or is he going to come out in between and kind of bridge the gap? Because if he does, then everybody back to fifth place, Jamie Conway, is in with a shot of having this kind of second place finish. I think it's entirely up for grabs.
Now, will he find himself betwixt and between all these different winding circles, as there is third position and Jens Homan making his way now towards Arnage Corner, and into the pits comes Ross Banfield then, as well as Sean Campbell again. So I think he's taking his splash and dash now.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. So he has decided he's not going to bother stretching it at all. And obviously, he's thrown away a lot of his lead here, but he will still come out significantly ahead because his time in the box is going to be so short. You'll see here on the counter. I wouldn't be surprised if he's going now. Yep, 5.2 seconds. So he's going to be at least 20 seconds ahead of Jens Homan.
Yeah, and then some right now. Homan's going to be a mile away. He's still only just coming out now through the final two chicanes. So it's quicker than a couple of F1 stops there. Getting that one sorted. That was a literal splash of fuel. But Ross Banfield, that's the key now. Where is he going to come out? Because he's still in the box at this point in time, and he's only just now left it. So Homan's going to get his place back with that fantastic stop. Thomas Cope's going to fly around, and he's going to pick it up then. That's third place. So he'll come back out in fourth. But now's the time to start attacking, because we're inside the phase where pit stops aren't going to make overtakes anymore. You've got to do it all on the track now, Derek.
You do, and of course, we talked here about Homan and what's going to happen here. And I think, you saw Banfield's going to come out behind him, but I'm suspicious of if Homan finishes this race with gas. So maybe now he's going to be patient. I mean, obviously Campbell came in and pitted with those guys, and he will give up some of his lead, but of course, still enough of a lead that short of something weird happening, he will win this race, I would say.
Keep an eye on Chris Barrett as well now, because his main driver he was racing against in the form of Martin Pearson is down in the pits, and he's going to leave the pits right now. So this, I think, Chris Barrett's got a lot of work to do on this one. Martin Pearson, what a stop that is. And he has done that by saving and siphoning off the fuel, Christian. And by doing that in comparison to someone like Chris Barrett, he's come out a good 5 seconds ahead.
Yeah, and crucially out of the draft range of Chris Barrett as well. And, I feel a bit for Barrett because he did have his own mistakes, but the one that kind of really took him out of that fight for... I feel like he was in that fight for that second spot still. And what really took him out of it was that contact that he had with Bonello. And Bonello himself has, struggled since then. He's 3 seconds back as well. So it really was a costly mistake for both drivers involved in that incident.
It really was, and it is a showcase to be had that these drivers have looked at trying to build up their margins, trying to get everything sorted, and this is the most unpredictable race that you can find when it comes to bringing it all together, when it comes to getting yourself in the right place at the right time. And there you can see the likes of Mr. Tom Dreiling, number 11. He's going to dive into the pits once more as he goes through. He's been struggling a little bit here today, and that is with damage out there. The black and orange mechanical flag, colloquially known as a meatball, and it's happened going up towards Indianapolis here, Derek.
Let's take a look and see what happens here. It's going to come... Oh, that's a wall. This lost it there through the corner, I think. Just got a little squirrely and wasn't able to save it. And able to drive it back, that's got to be good news in some form. Obviously, the meatball flag, as we refer to in iRacing, never a good thing. Yep, just lost it. Maybe got up on the grass there, Christian. Is that everything happened?
To be honest, I don't know why it went around as late on as it did, but that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with Indianapolis and how I'm kind of always frightened of it as a corner, because that kind of thing normally happens when you enter the initial sweep too quickly, and then you're trying to get the car slowed down, and you're just too aggressive with it, and it hooks right and throws you into the fence. But it didn't look like his entry speed was that high through there. It looked like it just got away from him somehow. But once again, Indianapolis proving that it is a particularly difficult corner.
Absolutely, and that's why we love it as a corner. It really tests you as a driver. Jamie Conway now over the back of Ross Banfield, searching to move up into 4th position, potentially 2nd. Is an opportunity here. They've almost been going for 2 straight hours trying to get this sorted, but one of the things with this blinking in front, Christian, is you actually lose the draft. Every time he blinks, he's gone. The car's not there. It doesn't register, so you don't get the tow for the moments that he's not on track.
Yeah, it is a little bit unfortunate that it does work that way, but unfortunately there's just no way around that. So every time you see Banfield disappear, it is a disadvantage for Jamie Conway, even though it is only a split second. But I think that both of these drivers have kind of got to get a move on, because Cope is not really being reeled in, and they need to make sure they don't fight each other instead of working together to catch back to Cope.
Seems like that is what is needed, and you sense now that there is an urgency with 25 minutes left to go in the race. Not an urgency as in we need to make rash and incredible lunging overtakes which come out of legend and folklore, Derek, but the sort of urgency of, right, we need to just subtly move up the train one at a time and sort of segment it off, gain that little bit of time, lap upon lap.
Yeah, the urgency in a way is almost is to be patient and smarter now than you were in the start of the race. As we're going to see here, going to close this gap here, and it's going to start to kind of get closer to that draft. But that's the subtlety you need to have here, is to be able to do that and get around this GTE here. And that's Pataska. No, that's not Pataska. Apologize.
That's Ryan Walker.
Brian Walker, yes. I saw the red on the back at first and assumed that was wrong on my part. But yeah, that's the urgency you have now, is to make a move and to be smart and to see if you can make up time. Now you're staring at that relative. Now that relative is moving so slow, and you just have to go, okay, we're making ground or we're not making ground, and you have to just settle in now at this point.
Yeah, you certainly do. And settling in, we have seen a lot of drivers in GTE manage that. You can see the gaps right now. Very, very spread out. 1 minute 37 between the top 5. And Christian, this has been the sort of race where Pataska's just walked away from the front. We haven't really needed to show him so much because he just has been that dominant, and he's done so on the same calls as Sangali and Walker and Freitas and Melnarovic. He's just made it look so easy so far today.
Yeah, he has, and that really started on the very first lap where he kind of got a free lead from nothing just on the initial start. Freitas obviously lost out quite a lot. That set him back, and Sangali having to start at the rear is what really disconnected the GTE field. And I feel for Sangali a little bit because he was doing a good job of maintaining pace. He was only about 12 seconds or so behind, and he had been kind of as close as 6 seconds for quite a while, until he had that incident out of the final corner. So the gap there is bigger than Sangali's pace justifies. I would say third on back. Ryan Walker has had possibly one of the most boring races he's ever going to have had, because just nothing has really gone on for him, you know? He's ran around a little bit with Melnaritz and Freitas, but both of those drivers have kind of suffered setbacks. Melnaritz, I think, made the biggest mistake by taking tires, because it just hasn't earned him anything. And then once you get outside of the top 5 in GTEs, you've got Fassiponte has been surprisingly significantly off the pace here, and has had a fairly dull day for himself. Dreiling obviously was rolling around on his own until he had that incident down in Indianapolis, and Redford is, well, he had a day to forget, I think it's fair to say.
Absolutely, and we've got battles going on right now. You've got this one out on track, which I think is pretty interesting. You can see on screen as they charge through. You've got the likes of Jamie Conway still trying to chase down Ross Banfield, but behind that, and just entering the front stretch in towards the Dunlop chicane, you've got Bonello and Money in a scrap for 8th place. Now, this is a big one here for Bonello. He has been trying to work his way back, has been stuck at the same pace over the course of this one, but it is going to be a case of Audi versus Porsche once again, Derek, here in this fight. Bonello needs to be a little bit coy with the way he deploys.
Needs to be a little bit, yeah, coy is a good word. Needs to be careful how he deploys, but very strategic in how he deploys here as he's going to make those moves. Of course, earlier in the broadcast, Christian talked about the difference in deployment and how not necessarily deployment, but how they recharge. One under braking and one not under braking, basically. So we'll have to wait and see here as we're going to come down the first part of Mulsanne. I mean, this is the Daytona chicane here, correct?
Yes.
Yep, this is the Daytona chicane. That's the one that they've named after the one at Daytona, was referred to as Le Mans. That's the, well, we know as the bus stop, and what I kind of want to still call the bus stop, but it's now Le Mans, and this one's Daytona. They're going to come down the second part of the chicane here, and I think he's going to make the move into the second chicane here, Jake.
I think there's traffic in front that's going to stymie that, and that's good relative looking there, because as Bonello went into the corner, there was David Milnarovic planted right in the middle, so if he'd have gone too wide there, Christian, he would have absolutely put himself wrong. Now he uses all that deployment. Money gives the room there on the outside, trying to avoid it, but all of a sudden Bonello's like, I haven't got alongside, I haven't got quite what I've wanted from it. And I think he may have saved himself because he didn't want to leave himself completely vulnerable when it came to this run to Indianapolis.
Yeah, and it looked like Money was a little bit surprised that Bonello was even, having a look there on that run down towards Mulsanne corner. But you see Bonello definitely on the button here. He's going for the pass. He wants to be ahead into Indianapolis.
He's used all of it. He's got through, but is this a case where he's done it too early on the straight because Money could come straight back? Doesn't go for the inside, and the move passed, scored, and completed. Jacob Money loses out, then Elvis Bonello, a king's ransom as he goes through, Derek.
Yeah, he did go through, and he's got by one GT card. Here's the second one they're going to get by. Both are going to clear it just fine. And now we're going to come down here into the Porsche Curves.
Conway's lost so much time.
Yeah, Conway is losing time on Banfield.
He's 4 seconds adrift now, so I don't know what's happened over the last lap, but it's very, very clear that Jamie Conway does not have the same element and level of pace, and I wonder if he just went too far wide, potentially, when it came to trying to get things done on the Mulsanne. Maybe he had a slowdown or something, Christian.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, but obviously, quite a big deficit now to make up, and I'm kind of surprised that this isn't closed up. It's actually just spread apart from, say, Kopeck to Conway here.
It's so surprising because it looked for all the world as we got more good battling going on. Money still trying to get back here at Bonello. It just looked for all the world really here, Derek. Like, this was going to be a race where it all closes back up at the end, and ultimately, by osmosis, everyone's starting just to spread away.
Yeah, it really has. But the thing to keep in mind, guys, P2, we're still not sure what's up with Holman. We know he had that quick pit stop. Let's not lose track of that, because it could be here with a minute or two to go that he falls back very quickly and this all shakes itself out again.
Very much could do. Of course, Jens Hohmann, with a 3-second margin at the line, has increased it on this lap, but if he's left himself short, then he'll have to do some managing at some point. There is the scrap going in towards the first chicane between Money and Bonello. That one close. It is also close just in front of them between Martin Pearson and Chris Barrett. The fight for 6th position is down under a second for the first time here in this one as Barrett kicks that cone to the side, says, no thank you, I want to take all of the track that's available to me. And Chris Barrett, this would be as good of damage limitation he could have done with the way that his race went after the contact at Indianapolis. Christian.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's you know, it's just frustrating when you have those moments happen to you in a race because, in fairness to Barrett, there was nothing he could really have done. You know, I don't feel like anybody really did anything wrong. I understand why Bonello went for the move. If he even really went for the move, he obviously immediately tried to redress it. He even pit with Barrett when it happened. So I certainly don't think it was an intentional send, but it was just massively disappointing for Barrett because it did so much damage to his left rear when he got hit that there was just no way he was going to be able to continue at a decent pace.
I've just noticed as well, going through Arnaud's corner, Derek, that Chris Barrett is staying 3 light years away from that left-hand side curve. He wants none of it now.
None. Nothing to do with it. He's like, yeah, I've been there, done that. No, I'm good. You know, I did want to point out, though, we talked a lot throughout this, 2 hours now, a little more than 2 hours, about the differences and the similarities between the 2.4 and the 24. The one thing I noticed, Christian, the track temp here is incredibly warmer than it was at this time of this in-sim time for the 24-hour race. We're probably talking, what, a 15 degree Fahrenheit difference in the track temp?
Yeah, I think that's because the air temp's not really come down in the same way. We were seeing as low as, say, 21, 22 Celsius for air temp, and obviously when you get to night, you start getting pretty negligible difference between air and track temperatures. They just become one with each other. But here, it's still as high as 25 Celsius, so the track a little bit higher than that at 27, but yeah, the thing is, though, when it starts getting down to that kind of level, it's all round about the same. I couldn't really tell any difference between when I was running at, say, 21C and 27C when it was kind of these kind of conditions. The time when you could really feel it was when it started to ramp up a lot in the morning, that the pace just completely went out of the track. So I don't think that this is going to be particularly challenging for them to deal with. If anything, it should be, still pretty favorable for them all the way to the end of the race.
The move not quite materializing then into the first chicane between Martin Pearson and Chris Barrett here. The 024, quite ironic really for a 2.4 hour race with the 024. And then you got Pearson's 19, who's done quite well actually off of that first chicane. He's given himself a little bit of room here in comparison to Chris Barrett on this run down, this looping up and down section towards the second chicane. Again, not quite close enough, but it's all about the runs off of this exit, and it was a much wider initial entry there, Derek, from Chris Barrett, and that might cost him a chance to make the move at the Mulsanne corner. Christian, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, as you see, he's having a look. He's going for a little bit of a weave there as we head into Mulsanne, but I've got to think that there's an element of being able to save just a little bit more battery when you're in somebody's draft. You see he's going for the outside now. Definitely looks like he was saving some up down the Mulsanne, but has he got enough that he can protect against the repass here into Indianapolis? Because I think it's coming from Pearson.
Well, here comes the little look, and I think he's got enough here. Through the left, into the right. He's absolutely got it sorted. Great move. Now, I wonder if we can get a look at what happened to the 69 machine of David Melnarovic coming up into the Dunlop S's, because it looks like he's had a bit of a moment out on track. Up the hill he goes, into the left, and the back just completely went on entry there, Christian. Bye-bye, see you later.
Yeah, it just loops around on him, and I was so frightened of that happening to myself, and it's very, very difficult to see LMP1. I'm not sure who that is. Is that Sean? Oh, it's Henderson. For a moment, I thought it was Sean Campbell there, but in terms of our other battle on track, Pearson has not given this up on Barrett. He looked to the outside for a pass at the start of the Porsche Curves. Thought better of it, though, this time.
Yeah, and wasn't quite able to just yet, but you're still in there. You're still within a second. You've still got a chance, and this is the focus. Look how heavy up over the curbs there, Derek, that it went for one Mr. Chris Barrett.
Yeah, it did. So I was watching different battle here. I was watching Money. I apologize for, I was kind of focused on that, watching Money really has fallen back a little bit in pace. But you're right, Barrett and Pearson still in this big battle here, and that's probably the more fun of the two. So yeah, no, it's a good battle going on.
Yeah, it is a great battle, and you're just seeing the differences they go through. Final 12 minutes then here in this race, which has been, for the victories here today, you would say, Christian, pretty much a bit of a formality. Top two in the championship, the reigning champion overall, Dallas Pataska, and then Sean Campbell. Both of those drivers who have been probably A1 and A2 positions in terms of the way they've taken this season on, now find themselves scoring equal points today. There's going to be no change at the top of the championship between them going into the World 600.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that they've sort of elected to take a net wash, which, you know, is still good for both of them in the sense of drop rounds and whatnot. It will help them both as the season goes on. But I think, in a sense, it's kind of denied us a little bit of a race. I almost wish that Sean Campbell had ran in GTE, because then we'd have been talking about this battle between Homan, Cope, Banfield, Conway for the race win in LMP1 instead of for second spot. And we would have probably had a battle for the race win as we see Tom Dreiling go off at the exit of the Porsche Curves. And the Ferrari able to dodge around the outside of him. I would love to see an onboard of that.
That was David Melnarovic going around it, but that was all Tom Dreiling. He was bottled up behind Josh Wolf. He went off and had a moment, found the walls, a bit scared. He'll make his way into the pits, but oh my goodness, David Melnarovic there with the ultimate Code Brown moment as he went through. Derek, you can see it here. He gets scared of the traffic, stays on the grass. That's what throws him in the wall. And then as he gets to turn on, we can go on board with Melnarovic here at this moment in time. This is the view that he has going through. He sees a couple lights in the distance, trying to get it rejoined. Oh, you just do not expect that. A car planted in the middle of Maison Blanche.
No, you don't expect that, nor should you ever expect that. That's scary stuff. I mean, that's unfortunate, really, second half of the race for Dreiling. Remember, he had that issue about 20 minutes ago at this point now, where he had the served the mandatory repairs, and he's back down pit road for more contact and more damage. So an unfortunate end to his race, but that is such a scary moment. And that is the benefit of having a team, having spotters, having co-drivers, anything who can spot that stuff and maybe help you through it. But that was almost out of nowhere. And you're right, you kind of barely saw the headlights spun around there, but that almost sort of came out of nowhere at the same time.
Speaking of out of nowhere, Elvis Bonello's lost the place to Jacob Money. He ran a little bit deep at Mulsanne corner, just skated it off the road almost, and then suddenly, whoop, thank you very much, the run to Indianapolis, Christian, and through goes Money.
Yeah, and whilst that's been going on, we've got the other battle with Barrett and Pearson still going on, and I'm a little bit surprised actually that Pearson hasn't gone for a move yet, but I'm also surprised that Bonello was not able to hold that position over Money. We'll have to see if he can get it back.
We certainly will. They are running out of time, though. You can see on the clock 8 minutes, 45 seconds remaining here in this race, and it's at the dictation of Sean Campbell, the number 26 car, as and when we will have those laps passing, of course, the football stadium there on the right-hand side. Le Mans 92 play there, play in the second division of French football, and we'll be certainly looking to move up towards, ironically, Derek, Ligue 1 Uber Eats.
That is very, very ironic in a way. So I wanted to ask, moving forward here, it seems like, like I said, we've been talking about Campbell and Pataska being our leaders here and keeping even points. I know Pataska has a background in ovals. I know that, Christian, you've worked with him in ovals before. I'm not as familiar with Campbell, I'll be honest. I don't know if he has a background or any real proficiency in ovals. What do you guys expect in the World 600 from both of those guys?
Pace.
Yeah.
I expect pace. I think, Christian, you expect the same.
Yeah, honestly, I would say the same. I think the 87 as an oval car is not a particularly difficult one to set up. So I don't think there's any disadvantage or any advantage in either direction there between the two drivers. And it's such a driver's car anyway that to be honest, you don't need a super amazing setup for those cars, because your tire management and how you approach it is going to make a much bigger difference. As long as you're in the ballpark, you know, you can't be miles out, but those guys will be
Here comes
in
Bonello.
the ballpark.
We're just getting a note now of Bonello side by side out on track here. You can see it right now, moving under that Toyota hybrid bridge. Of course, the news that 2023 there will be a GT86 joining the service, and of course the Fuji Speedway jumping on very, very soon to iRacing. And now you just figure out what can you do on the brakes through the right. Bonello just struggling to get that car turned out over on that curb, and he's lost all that momentum he very nearly got through and gained up for.
What he's trying to do is he's trying to make change here and pass money in these last minutes here, and seeing if he can maybe take away 8th place and finish 1 spot ahead of where he is right now.
That would definitely be the plan at this point as they race very heavily in the dust. The lights illuminating around the Armco barriers, the guardrails, the concrete that's there, those very, very intimidating walls through the final sections of the lap as they now run towards the final couple of chicanes out there on track. Money trying to make bank, so to speak here, Christian, and get away inside of these final 3 laps, because Sean Campbell, when he crosses the line, should have himself about 4 minutes left on the clock, which will mean that he will be pushed to do 2 more.
Yeah, Bonello kind of set up his own demise a little bit there. He tried to really, really open out the exit advantage by doing that whole deal of running as far wide as possible on the entry curb, on the outside curb at entry, and it just didn't work for him. He wasn't able to get the car pointed, and he lost a lot of momentum, which he then wasn't able to regain through the Porsche Curves. He is still within the draft range of Money, and he's going to get pulled back up as we come onto the Mulsanne with the pair of them, but you know, opportunity lost by trying to just get a bit too much in an area where I don't think he needed to.
Yeah, and that can really hurt you, and not just for 1 lap, but for 2 laps or 3 laps, because it's going to take a whole lot of effort to get that all clawed back up again. There is Sean Campbell, and you can see that gap, 31.5 seconds, and he's going to cross the line with about 4 minutes and 40 seconds, Derek, left on the clock. It does guarantee that it's 2 laps left in this race, because with a gap of 31 seconds to Homan, you can't do the traditional, I'm just going to lift off the throttle for about 30 seconds, hold my lead, and get over the line with a lap to spare. He absolutely needed that extra lap of fuel.
I mean, yeah, I guess you could say he did. Of course, there's still a couple question marks about Homan that we've not solved yet. And we're down here to the last minutes of the race, and maybe we're going to find out that Homan knew something we didn't about that pit stop. Remember, he had that really massively quick pit stop compared to his competitors earlier. So I want to kind of keep an eye on him in these last couple laps and make sure he stays on pace. It's almost weird to think that I know what you're saying. Campbell couldn't have stopped for 30 seconds and, you know, saved the lap, but with his pace, I bet he could have.
Well, we will see. At this point, he's certainly trying to drive with everything and a little bit more in the back. As he goes through, Jens Homan really pushing forward and trying to make this happen. And there is Sean Campbell in the final stages there, passing your GTE race leader in the form of Dallas Pataska, who he himself has been driving a race out of this world. And so these two, okay, yes, they're fighting in different classes today. Yes, the points haul's going to be even, but it does set up here, at least from this point, this being pretty much the halfway stage, Christian, the second half of the season is going to be all about, can Campbell continue on this run, and can Dallas Pataska find some weaknesses in the back half of the season?
Yeah, it's really going to depend on how strong a performance Dallas can put in for the second half, because he's definitely working out of a bit of a hole. You know, he is reasonably far back, if we're completely honest. You think the amount of points that Campbell's going to potentially drop over the remainder of the season, it's going to be really difficult to close the gap up. And to be honest, he pretty much needs to be winning races in the same way that Campbell has been since the start of the season.
I wouldn't put it outside of the realms of possibility. I think that if you get a couple races to turn around that momentum, Sean Campbell could be in a little bit of trouble in terms of that championship lead. I mean, Derek, what, about 2 months ago, we were all saying that Charles Leclerc locked up the Formula One championship after about 4 races. Now look at it. He's not even got the lead of the championship anymore.
I was thinking about a point that you guys made earlier with Campbell and Pataska. I think moving forward, if Pataska wants to have this points title, he's going to have to challenge Campbell. You know, I respect the idea that you want to run a GTE and you want to do well, and congrats on what is likely a win here. I'm not taking away from that, but in the future, you're going to have to challenge Campbell. You're going to get up there and race the same class with him if we have any multi-class races left in the majors, and you're just going to have to really, you know, points battle him heads up for the rest of the season, I think.
Heads up, no limit. World Series going on right now in Vegas, and that should be very fun. But at least for the moment, some really, really strong work being done. We are now heading, though, as Sean Campbell will cross the start-finish line into the final lap of the race here at the Circuit des 24 Heures du Mans at this point in time. A track here, Circuit de la Sarthe, which has been host to so many amazing races. It's not over in the fight for second position overall. We still worry about how much fuel Jens Hohmann and his Porsche 919 has in the back of it. He's been really trying to build that gap, and as he has a little bit of a stutter going through there, those chicane curves, he's still got that margin. There is Dallas Pataska. He starts his final lap as well, and he himself a 34-second gap, and you can see the parallels here, Christian, between these two at the top of the championship, each with an almost equal gap at this point in time entering the last lap.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of why I was saying it's a bit of a shame that we didn't see them in the same class, because we'd have been talking about a big battle in LMP1 between, you know, Hohmann, Cope, Banfield, Conway for the race win, and you would have presumably seen a pretty titanic battle between Pataska and Campbell in the GTEs.
Yeah. And there we just see, actually, that's Elvis Bonello, sorry, who has now finally made the pass on money and has done so with a lap and a half to go there, Derek. That was just a case of being opportunistic with a bit of lap traffic in the form of David Melnarovich.
Yeah, it was being opportunistic. Pardon me, it's hard for me to say apparently, but used that lap traffic well, used them as a moving chicane almost, or a pick, and made that pass. Now the question is, with that, you know, lap and a half left he referred to, has he overdrawn his chances? Is he going to break the bank, or can money get back around?
That's a slowdown. That is absolutely a slowdown penalty there for Elvis Bonello, and he has just let him right back in with that. Well, in fact, splash and dashing.
Well, that's a surprise. I don't think any of us were expecting to see Bonello have to pit here.
The numbers were not right on the night, and just like that, Elvis Bonello, who thought he had 8th place wrapped up, suddenly might be in a little bit of a pickle here for the top 10. David H. Baker making his way through the curbs right now, and he'll be certainly trying to steal that away. Don't expect Bonello to be long, though. As he finally hits his marker, he'll get the fuel in the car, and he should be off and away momentarily. There he goes. David H. Baker, by comparison, just going through the chicanes now. So not much more you can say. But at least in terms of this race, Sean Campbell makes his way through the Porsche Curves for the final time. He has driven an absolutely flawless race. He has outdone everybody on strategy, and with a splash and dash to go as well, so an extra stop. He is still clear by over half a minute. There was no way on God's green earth that anyone was going to stop him today. He has been a cut above the rest, and that is an almighty gauntlet thrown down to anyone who wants to challenge him for the title. Sean Campbell takes the win here at the Circuit, the 24 Heures du Mans, in an absolutely flawless drive here today. Jens Hohmann will come to the line at this point in time. He will be the one in second as we look back then at one Dallas Pataska. But if there were any worries in terms of fuel mileage for Jens Hohmann, well, now he has just got himself home. He can lift and coast from here and take second position. Derek, what a drive today by Sean Campbell.
Pure domination is what it was. I mean, yeah. And I think actually Hohmann ran out at the line. This is a quick note, but yeah, you can see him kind of wiggling it there. But pure domination by Campbell. That's wow.
And then if you want your parallel, it's Thomas Cope who finishes third. Banfield will be over the line in fourth, and Jamie Conway fifth. It was 1 second for Thomas Cope at the end of all of that. But Dallas Pataska, wow, that is what he needed to get back on track. A smaller division, a chance to just pick up a win, run along to Charlotte and say, you know what, at the home of oval racing, I will now try my hand to beat car number 26. Dallas Pataska with the victory, Christian, and that is just a case of kicking the can down the road to the next race.
Yeah, absolutely. And with 4 oval rounds, one of them being a dirt oval in the remainder of the championship, he's definitely got some opportunities to claw some points back, and he just needs to kind of keep this going, you know, and have a strong run at Charlotte. Really, he needs to win the race at Charlotte, and if he can do that, then I think he might build some momentum and be able to fight back.
He definitely does need that. The last few drivers now are making their way over the line, so at least for a moment, we're going to step aside here. Someone's trying to find themselves to an establishment to get some food, but we are going to step away for one moment. We will come back with post-race coverage here from this brilliant, brilliant city in Pays de la Loire, and we will see you in just a couple of moments.
This is the world's premier online racing simulation. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat from your home computer with the most realistic online motorsports experience you'll find anywhere. Race virtually in the world's biggest events with officially licensed series, cars, and tracks. From the high banks of Daytona to the blistering speeds of Indianapolis, the dirt of Eldora to the world's most legendary road courses. It's all here, and with more than 180,000 people just like you already driving, you'll always have someone to race. Ready to get behind the wheel? Sign up at iRacing.com to get started. This is your chance to get behind the wheel. The opportunity to race just like the pros. From the grassroots levels, where we all got our start, to the most popular race cars on the planet. From the fairgrounds of Nashville to the high banks of Daytona, to tracks that will never be forgotten. Realistic driving, intense competition, all from the comfort of your own home. This is the ultimate motorsports simulation. This is iRacing.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, as the lights are on here in the French countryside. We say that it was showtime for certain drivers. The top 2 in the championship doing exactly what they needed to do. Sean Campbell comes to the line, picks up the victory, does so with a wonderful drive. 2 hours, 26 minutes, 44 seconds. He wins by 33 seconds in the end over Jens Hohmann. He was a cut above the rest with even an extra stop. Thomas Cope will land up on the podium, and he finishes in 3rd position with Ross Banfield 4th, just a second behind, and Jamie Conway ending up his race in 5th place. Chris Barrett did a really good job of recovering back to 6th. He got involved in an incident in the mid part of the race, so that meant for him that he had a lot of work to do, with Martin Pearson finishing 7th and Jacob Money in 8th place. Trevor Vavrovsky gets 9th, and Elvis Bonello, having to do an extra splash and dash on top of the incident, rounds out the top 10. Final 5 in category are David H. Baker, a lap down Joshua Wolf, and Travis Henderson, who went into the side of Gabriel Roosto on lap 1, putting both of them a lap down, and then Cordell Cologne finishing out in 15th position. Christian, you had a little look down at GTEs.
Yeah, that's with LMP1, a dominant victory here, but this time for Dallas Pataska. He had over 30 seconds on Michele Sangali. Sangali had a really good run, actually. He did have to start at the tail end of the field, and he was matching Pataska's pace pretty well at the beginning, but a little incident midway dropped him back further than his pace showed. Ryan Walker, he had a bit of a fight near the beginning of the race, but then afterwards, it was, it was pretty plain sailing for him. He comes home 3rd with Miguel Freitas in 4th, dropping down from 2nd. And David Melneretz, I saw him take tires and he just was never able to recover from it. Comes home 5th, still a good result for him. Adam Fastaponte 6th. Tom Dreiling we saw have some issues. He comes home in 7th, with Mark Redford also having some issues in 8th.
So that is the field as they go through. We do have drivers ready and waiting to have their conversations. Dallas Pataska is first up, and he is stood by with Derek Watson.
That's right. He is the winner of the GTE field this evening, Dallas Pataska. First off, Dallas, congrats on the win.
Thank you.
So tell us how you felt about the race. Tell us about how you prepared for this, obviously, with changing cars between this and the 24.
Yeah, there was very little preparation for this race on the GTE side. It was pretty much all focused into the P2 yesterday and the 24. So very thankful, and shout out to Christian here for helping us out over at Satellite a little bit just to get us started and put us in a good spot for this race without the same amount of prep that we typically put into these. It's a huge thanks to him for doing that. As far as the race overall, pretty straightforward. I usually go with the tire strat and try to be more aggressive with times, but this time I wanted to try something a little bit different. Went with the no tire strategy, and it paid off. But the car drove like a dream, so it makes everything else a lot easier when it's like that.
There you go. So we were talking about in the broadcast, yourself and Sean Campbell were both class leaders today. So in essence, no real points gained. What are you looking forward to when we go to the World 600 in a few weeks, though?
More of the same. I know I didn't gain any on him today, but I also see it as I didn't lose any to him either. He's obviously been on a tear, so anytime you can at least make sure he isn't extending the gap, I see that as a positive. And then really that's been the goal all along, coming into the more attrition-focused races such as the World 600. And there again, it's the same kind of thing. You know, a win would be nice, but ultimately it's about not losing points. And after that, finish the race and just see where we end up. Same thing as last year.
You know, it's a positive outlook. Anyone you want to say hello to or thank for your result today?
Yeah, I'd just like to shout out everybody over at Satellite between today's race and the effort yesterday. It was a massive effort overall to put everything together and to have the performance that we had, and that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for guys like Alex Gal and Syandra and the rest of the gang. So huge shout out to them, and hopefully more of that coming up soon.
Well, he is the driver of the 23 car, finishing first in class. That is Dallas Pataska.
Certainly was, and it was a great victory. We're going to bring Thomas Cope in next then, the driver who finished third position overall when it came to the LMP category. And Thomas, you know, you look at that race there, and especially in the very early stages, it looked like you had a whole ton of pace. You were ready and raring to go, but it looked like, especially early on, those 3 slowdown penalties, they really set the tone of, okay, it might be a bit excitable. I need to dial myself back a little bit to get into the range of this race.
Yeah, I mean, I've been struggling all race as well. I'm carrying physical injuries at the moment. Have really limited me. Those last couple of laps were a real push, mentally and physically. Not being able to gain the time on ends in front, and also just physically, like I was physically pushing my leg down to go 100% throttle because I couldn't push 100% throttle on my with my leg at the moment.
Wow, so an incredible bit of achievement then to firstly A, find a finish, and B, find a podium. But when you push yourself into that sort of limit with this sort of series, how important is it for you to be out there scoring, looking for results? You've got 1 victory so far in the series. A 3rd place here certainly helps you out quite a bit, but knowing that it's probably the most intensive race lengthwise coming up next on the calendar, do you feel like you absolutely need a couple weeks R&R to get yourself back to full fitness?
I do definitely, and looking back in a few of the results further back, I mean, the last 2 races I've not been able to be here, which were good playing battles for me, unfortunately. Porsche Cup, I could have done well. I believe in that series. And yeah, in Indy 500, I feel like I could have had a good result as well. But just being able not to be able to be here and perform has limited as well. But it's making the most of I'm here. And today was an attempt to try and get second, to bring as many points in as possible for the championship. But in the end, Jen's pulled out some really good pace at the end. I didn't think he had in his locker, and managed to keep onto it as well.
Well, the floor is yours here, Thomas. Shout out sponsors. Who gets it done?
Track Racer, always helped out with some really good rigs. Major's Garage, they really do some good setups and power us through with setups for all our series. The whole team, Olympus Esports, we didn't have the best results this weekend in the 24 in Split 2, but we'll rebuild and hopefully come back next year. And everyone around, friends, family, everyone that we're meeting up with next week as a big team, and the actual Le Mans as well. It's going to be a very fun weekend, and it has been a fun week to go as well.
Certainly been a fun week here. Thomas Cope joining us then with a third place finish overall, battling not just the limits of the track, but the limits of his own body as well, which is an incredible achievement. Christian Schallner, though, has a chance to talk to the most boring finisher in this race. Third position overall, and almost nothing happened for Ryan Walker.
Yeah, Ryan, it was kind of a bit of a dull race, I would say, for you. Obviously, that first stint you had some company, but after Melnitz and Freitas kind of fell by the wayside, you sort of just were logging laps. I mean, you got third, so you must be happy with it, but how'd you keep yourself awake for the second half of that race?
Yeah, it was the first stint. It was good fun. It was good fun racing. David Malnarovitz and Miguel Freitas, it was good fun racing them, and then I don't know what happened to them at the first set of pit stops. I guess they must have had a speeding penalty, or I know Miguel said he didn't take tyres, or he did take tyres in the second pit stop. So I guess not taking tyres in my second stop, but I guess it helped me. It gained some time in them. It gave me a bit of a gap for the rest of the race. I kept telling myself just to pace myself, just get to the finish, and towards the end I ended up fuel saving a little bit just in case we went an extra lap. But overall, third place, I'm really happy with that around my favourite track, and it was kind of unexpected, to be honest, because the pace of that Ferrari in a straight line was just unbelievable. But third place, I'm buzzing.
It's good to hear. And so I know a little bit about the car and setup that I think you were driving. And yes, I also noticed that straight line speed was not necessarily our strength, but hopefully the car, got it done for you. You seem like you had a good time out there. Obviously, you came home with a third. Now, next time out, something totally different. World 600, Charlotte, 1987 cars. You got any thoughts on that? You looking forward to it? You kind of dreading it? Is it anywhere in between?
I'm actually really excited about it, to be honest. I mean, ovals have never been my strong point, but the oval races I just go into, I go in with the mindset of treating it just as fun, and whatever happens, and looking forward to it. And the cars that are being used, I've never raced before, so it'll be a new car to learn, but looking forward to it, and it should be good fun.
Yeah, it definitely will be good fun, especially if you've kind of not really learnt them before. They're a little different, but yeah, they do make for some really good racing. So hopefully you'll enjoy that one. And before we let you go, is there anybody that you'd like to give a shout out to?
First of all, to you, Christian, for the help. It was really appreciated, and also congratulations to you and your team on winning the top split in the GT class in the Majors 24. Dallas, as well as always, for just being awesome, and congratulations to him and his win. Sponsor-wise, Maradness, Ellis Engineering, and there's someone else that I can't remember off the top of my head, but lastly to you guys for putting on the broadcast, and I'm looking forward to sitting down with a beer and watching it back later.
Well, we appreciate the kind words, and thank you for coming and chatting with us, and once again, congratulations on the third place finish.
Cheers, Christian.
Well, there you have it. Ryan Walker there finishing in third position. But that will bring us to a close then here from this wonderful and magical racetrack. We come here every year. It's a place which always has an element of fun and excitement to it, and it will continue to do so for many years to come yet. Massive thanks has to go to all the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcast that you can see here up on screen. An additional thanks has to go to June Lalonde, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. here just below. As well as with the team here today from Derek, Christian, Zach, and Dougie. You can find more information about the Global Sim Racing channel at globalsimracingchannel.com or through our social media listed on the screen. Also, if you haven't had the chance to already, please check out our merchandise store at gsrc.storenvy.com. Keep a link in the description below, so don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well so you don't miss a moment here on GSRC. In terms of the next that's coming up with the European majors, it is going to be the World 600, which is going to be coming up near the end of the month. So make sure that you tune in for that. We'll be at Charlotte Motor Speedway. We're going to get the 87s out. And my goodness, Buicks and all the rest of it is going to be so fun to see. In terms of what's coming up next, though, Sunday Drivers, and that is going to be roughly about 2 hours from now. So check in. We're heading to the virtual Oran Park because the real Oran Park right now is a housing estate. So Oran Park will be the time and the place to go and get there. We also have more upcoming races coming along, June 26th for the European region, but so much more coming up. Check the screen, mark them down on your calendar. So until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.